Friday edition of Robbie and Rex Road here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rex Road, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. It was a rough one last night for the Nashville Predators. We've got a lot to get to today on that front. Taking your thoughts all show long here on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Joe Rex wrote a tough loss last night for the Predators. They fall in overtime, 4-3, at the hands of the Carolina Hurricanes. Your initial impressions of the game last night. First off, how are we doing on the sleep part of this? How much sleep did you get last night?
Yeah, it's not worth even mentioning. Negligible. I'm also instantly worried here about the Wi-Fi situation because we have in-laws here, and I just thought about that. So
off to a
there's a lot more people drawing. Should I wake everyone up?
Maybe so.
And have them take their phones off Wi-Fi.
Just everyone leave the house.
6 o'clock, right?
Everyone get out of the house while I do the show here today. We'll see how that goes over. It's going to be basically like an episode of The Walking Dead here today with Robbie Stanley and Joe Rexrode.
Well, I mean, I could start by just being okay, just switch all your phones off. You get up, maybe make me a pot of coffee, okay? But by the way, I did get one here. Check this out. Now, I put this in a Detroit Lions coffee mug because I want Predators fans to remember there are much worse things, okay, than having a tough loss for your team in the postseason. So here you go. You could be a fan of this team.
That's right. Detroit Lions are a good reminder.
For the Predators fans who are Lions fans too,
there's no help for you at that point. Which I'm sure there's at least someone out there who is a Predators fan and a Detroit Lions fan as well. Joe, I thought last night, the Predators, they had that game right where they wanted it. I thought the first 30, 35 minutes of the game last night, they played about as well as you could have hoped for. You get up, you build a multi-goal lead, you're up 3-1 in that game. I thought after, Johansson's goal on the power play there, the Predators were right on the doorstep of really just taking that thing over and getting it to a place where it was going to be really difficult for Carolina to come back. And to Carolina's credit, they held on. Nedeljkovic made some big saves in the second period, and they were able to get that power play goal to make it 3-2. And look, we're going to talk a lot today about the third period and everything that happened there, and the Dougie Hamilton goal, and then obviously Aho's goal in overtime as well. Carolina really took over in the last 20 minutes of that game. But I thought really, when I go back and look at this game yesterday, the one that sticks out the most and that stings the most, I think if you're a Predators fan, is that power play goal by Carolina in the second period to make it 3-2. Because right up until that point, the Predators had every ounce of momentum in that game. And just another example of a game last night that when it's over, you look back at about 2 or 3 plays where the Predators had it. They were right there, and they just let Carolina off the hook.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And it's a good question even, which one, stings more? But that one was tough because, Ekholm, if he just and I know it's easy to say, just, send it somewhere else. But he had just enough time. It was a backhand clear. And, if he can just send it one direction or the other, that thing is killed. The building is absolutely on fire. And who knows from there? Who knows? The Canes were going to make a big push in the third regardless. But, to get it back to the goal there was massive, I thought, for Carolina. That was 6 minutes that the Preds had a 2-goal lead. So that leaves us with 18 minutes, 55 seconds out of a series that was actually longer than 7 games because of all the overtimes that the teams were separated by more than a goal.
Yeah, exactly. And, I thought the start of that game, if you're the Predators, Nick Cousins scores early into the game. Carolina comes back. They tie it up at 1. But even, after the first period, I think you felt pretty good about the way the Predators were playing for the most part. And then I mean, they come out and dominated for that opening 10 to 12 minutes of the second period in a way that they haven't so far in this series. And the goals were one thing. I mean, the goals were good. They could have scored, I don't know, 2 or 3 more goals in the first part of that second period. I just thought they played really well, and it looked to me like a team that was on a mission last night and was playing with an intensity level that I didn't feel like Carolina was matching early in that game. And Sebastian Aho kind of talked about it on the broadcast after the second period, how there was another level that Carolina was going to have to get to in order to compete in this game. And then I thought in the third period, obviously, they got to that level, and it was difficult for the Predators to even get out of their zone at times in the third period. And, you know, UC Saros was awesome. Once again, he made some incredible saves in the third period. But I tweeted this out last night while it was happening. It just kind of felt like the Predators were hanging on for dear life in the third period. And you can get away with that against some teams. You cannot get away with that against the Carolina Hurricanes. No matter how good your goalie is, eventually they're going to make you pay. And Dougie Hamilton made the Predators pay last night in the third period.
Yeah. Look, you knew that down a goal that they were going to be throwing everything at the Preds, and it's always a tough one. I mean, I feel like you still need to be aggressive. Ryan Johansson said after the game, you know, some of it is on, he said some of it on us for, you know, sitting back basically, playing defense, thinking about not gambling, about being careful. I mean, it's tough. It's easy to sit here and say, nah, you know, like you guys should have been more aggressive yourself. You got to, but you know, that's it's not as easy as just saying it like that. You know, I mean, they didn't execute. And look, Trennan made a couple mistakes back to back that were just, I mean, so big. And obviously the guy was exhausted. That line had been out there for a long time. And I mean, he's another stride from not having an icing. But he dumped the puck a little early. They have to stay out there. And then John Hines kind of, you know, described what happened there. I mean, they play man on face-offs, and basically, you know, to simplify it, you know, he lost his guy, and all of a sudden you have a tie game.
Yeah, and full credit to Carolina on that play because, I mean, and they talked about this in the postgame last night too. You've played the Predators at this point 2 times to close out the regular season and then 6 games. So you've played them 8 times in a row. There's a pretty good level of familiarity there, and Dougie Hamilton, Jacob Slavin last night talked about, you know, noticing some tactics the Predators had on face-off plays in their own zone and taking advantage of that. And it was a heck of a risky play. You had Jacob Slavin and Dougie Hamilton, their 2 defensemen on that play, totally pinching down. I mean, you don't see that happen very often. So it was a gutsy play by Carolina because if it doesn't work, all of a sudden they're caught going the other way, and the Predators could have an odd man rush. But I think a calculated risk by the Hurricanes there because, to your point, they knew the Predators were at the end of a shift there, and that line was just so exhausted that I think you felt comfortable if you're Carolina taking a risk on that play because I'm not sure that line for the Predators had anything left in the tank to get them back going the other way.
Right, and look, hey, I mean, Nedeljkovic to me has been very good all through the series,
Yep.
But that was a different level for him. And you start with who knows how this game goes if Trennan finishes on another. I mean, the Preds had a lot of odd man rushes in this game, and some great passes to create great chances. Nedeljkovic had some big time saves in this game, and some of them were, you know, clear vision, one guy, you know, isolated, and you know you expect him to make the save, but he had some that you wouldn't necessarily expect to. I mean, I thought that, I mean, like you said, Robbie, I mean, like the first almost 2 periods, the Preds were dominating 5-on-5.
Yep.
Just really they were, and so Nedeljkovic also really, I think, earned his stripes in this series in the end too. I mean, it was the right call, I think, for Rod Brind'Amour. It was the right call to just leave him in there, and that team is with him playing like that, you know, they got a chance here.
Yeah, and look, Joe, I think the bottom line, and, you know, I had Carolina at 6 coming into the series. I thought the Predators showed even better than I thought they would in this 6-game series. the bottom line is, I mean, the margin for error against a team like Carolina is just so small. And I said it yesterday. It felt to me like Game 5 was a game that you'd look back on at the end of the series and say, you know, the opportunity was right there for the Predators, and they just kind of let it slip away. And I felt, you know, similar about last night's game as well. You played just about as well as you could play for 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden either let off a little bit or probably just more accurately, Carolina got going a little bit. And I still believe after 6 games here, when Carolina is operating at their best, and I think we saw their best last night in the third period, when they're operating at their best, they can get to a level that I just don't think this Predators team can get to right now. And I think that's what we saw at the end of that game last night, and I don't think there's any question about it. The better team in this series ultimately is the team that won.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone would argue that. I think the point of the whole foundation of the argument is, did the Preds just kind of play over their heads, or was, matchup sorrows, whatever you want to throw in there when we see teams kind of surprise in a playoff series, or did the Preds become something that close to a team of Carolina's caliber since mid-March? I know some Preds fans would immediately reject the last thing, but the truth is probably somewhere in there. I don't know exactly where. I don't think this was just like the Preds flukily being in this series. But the question now, of course, is what does this mean? What is this team? I don't think there's any question. I wrote this in The Athletic, which, by the way, I think got published around 2:30 in the morning.
It did.
This is the first overachieving postseason for them in 4 years. But still, like, if you're saying that after a 6-game first-round loss, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's now the challenge for David Poile as they move forward here, is to figure out exactly what this run means, exactly what the last 2.5 months have meant for this Predators team as well, in terms of how competitive are they really? How close are they really to being a Stanley Cup contender? And we'll get to that a lot coming up later today and throughout this offseason here as well. We're taking your thoughts all show long on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025, reacting to the Predators being eliminated last night by the Carolina Hurricanes. We'll do that coming up next. This is Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 1025, The Game.
And there's a shot at a score off the left board. The face-off win. Slavin took the shot, and the Predators' season is over. The Hurricanes at 106 of the overtime period beat Nashville 4-3.
Oh, a shot through the screen, and Slavin, just a quick wrister from the left point, beats Saros over the glove, and that was quick, and it is quiet.
And a stunner, an absolute stunner.
Stunner is the right word last night for the Predators in overtime. They fall 4-3 at the hands of the Carolina Hurricanes. Sebastian Aho, 2 goals last night, including the game winner on a redirection in overtime on a shot by Jacob Slavin, and the Predators' season comes to a close. Taking your reaction all show long today here on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Ben on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, here's the sunshine blowing. I'm excited for some of the core to change. The young and hungry guys make the future bright. Just got to get away from the guys that only show up part of the time, especially if they're overpaid. Can't wait. So, Ben, a little bit of excitement today on the text line.
Well, I will come back at you, Ben, with some doom and gloom. Who are you getting rid of and how?
It's a great question.
I mean, that's going to be the interesting thing here. One of many interesting things. But look, I think that Ben's sentiment there on the young, hungry guys and on a lot of players to me emerged. And look, I understand, like, if most of your excitement is at bottom 6 forwards, and things like that, okay, that's not everything you need. But man, like the Herd line, that's a real deal, I mean, I think Cunnin is a guy who you certainly feel like you can build with. Still think that way about Tolvanen for sure, even though he got scratched last night. And, actually, Jared Stillman asked about Fabro. I think that was the last question, the presser. And, John Hines gave a pretty long answer saying, yeah, man, like he's a big part of the future. And I mean, honestly, I think some of that answer on him is that Carrier was so good. Now, I know people are going to say, okay, then why did I ever have to watch any Harper or Goodbrandts in the series? And I understand, but Carrier also somewhat to me offsets the sort of disappointment / confusion on Fabro, because Carrier, I think he's one of the biggest revelations of this season.
I agree. I mean, I think he's been pretty much everything you could have hoped for and a lot more. I mean, nobody expected Alex Carrier to play as well as he did coming down the stretch. I mean, he was an afterthought for this roster heading into the season. And to have him coming down, and not only him coming down and playing top 4 minutes in the last part of the season here, but playing well in top 4 minutes. I mean, that's a really good thing for the Predators as they move forward here, because that gives you options I think you didn't really feel like you had as you move forward into next season, especially with the top 4 on defense. And speaking of the top 4 on defense, I mean, we've gotten through the show so far. We've not mentioned one of the biggest plays in the game last night, and that is Roman Josi taking a check along the boards from Jordan Martinook. You go back and you look at the replay, and the initial contact is with Josi's shoulder, and then Martinook kind of follows through and catches Josi on the chin. He slams up against the boards, and that's 5 minutes and 30 seconds into the third period. Josi's gone. He's down the tunnel, and he never comes back in the game. Obviously, losing Roman Josi is a massive loss for this Predators team. And, going up against Carolina with 5 defensemen is challenging enough anyway, but when you're missing your unquestionably best defenseman out there, that was a really tough blow for the Predators when they really needed Josi the most last night.
No question. I mean, and you, as it was going and everyone knew Josi wasn't out there, it's like not only are a lot of things happening you would expect, and the Preds are just playing defense and just trying to get out of here, and then he's not in it. I mean, it's a lot to ask. So did you think it was a dirty hit? I mean, I thought it was kind of close, but I didn't necessarily think so.
No, I mean, I didn't think it was a dirty hit. I mean, sometimes things just happen and head contact happens. Now, I was interested to get John Hines' thoughts on the hit, and I asked him about it last night, and he did not go there. Did not even mention Roman Josi in the question I asked last night. So I was interested to see what he thought. I mean, it's one of those things, too, that, I've watched Roman Josi since he came into the league, and you probably don't think about it now anymore, but there was a pretty early concern level of concussions with him. I mean, I remember when he got his first deal, it was a 7-year deal, and you were thinking to yourself, all right, I mean, this kid's really talented, but 7 years is a long time to give this defenseman who's been in the league for a year and a half and has dealt with some concussions early in his career. So anytime Roman Josi gets hit in the head, I start to kind of think back to those days and the early days where it felt like he had his fair share of concussions coming into the league. But, yeah, I mean, I thought it was just one of those plays where the initial contact is on the shoulder and he follows through, and there's no question he makes contact with his head. I didn't think it was a case of Jordan Martinook just absolutely running the captain or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, look, obviously they miss it, and who knows? I mean, if that's what it was, and it looks like that. I mean, I've watched the replay a few times and now him skating off and stuff, and that's certainly what you think of, the head. And if that's the case, I mean, it's pretty much a lock he wouldn't have played in Game 7. So, I mean, I guess there's another thing if you wanna find any comfort, and you're a Predators fan today, in the way that game turned out. Josi probably doesn't play in Game 7, and we see with Carolina how important Slavin is.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
they didn't lose when he played.
Yeah, I mean, he's undefeated when he plays, and I told people this heading into the series. He is their best defenseman. I think we saw that very clearly when he came back in the lineup. Joe, we talked about it yesterday here on the show that it was going to be a massive game for those three guys that we talk about a lot. That is Philip Forsberg, Ryan Johansson, and Matt Duchene on a line together. Obviously, Johansson back on the power play. Duchene as well. Johansson capitalizes on the 5-on-3, a really important goal at the time to put the Predators up 3-1. What did you think overall of the way that line played last night? Was it the effort that you were looking for out of those three last night against Carolina?
No, I don't think it was. Johansson, gets the 5-on-3, and Josi, just sick pass there. I thought Duchene. I think with Duchene in this series, a lot. He certainly, made some plays, showed some bursts. He had one, situation where he had a real good look.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, Duchene's kind of looking for something. He's trying to set something up, and before he can pull it off, he's separated from the puck. Carolina very aggressive with him, and it worked. You're talking 2 shots on goal for him, Forsberg and Johansson. And again, we know Johansson, one of them was the 5-on-3 gimme. So, no, I did not think that line was good enough. Now, there were times certainly where they were part of a rolling line situation of just giving the Canes all kind of trouble. But, I mean, I thought the Cousins, the new look Richardson, Cousins, Halla line.
Yeah.
They were absolutely cycling on those guys. Granlund's line, same thing. I mean, I thought those were the best lines last night. So, I mean, I think up and down the lineup, credit due for how they played. And 5-on-5, the Preds were just really good. But and you can't say those guys weren't part of it. But again, we've talked about it. That's not enough. And I don't think there was enough from those guys. So what does that mean? I don't know, but it wasn't enough.
I don't think it was either. I mean, they had their moments in the game where they put some pressure on Carolina. I agree totally about Duchene. I mean, he had the one look on the rush last night where I thought he had a pretty good chance to score there, and Nedeljkovic makes a great glove save on the rush. And that was an example of Duchene using his speed there. But other than that, I thought he was getting knocked off the puck. I think it's at times he was overthinking where to go with the puck last night as well. I thought Forsberg had a couple of moments as well where he looked dangerous. He made a great play at one point. I think it was maybe later in the first period to keep the puck in the zone and keep a possession alive and kind of twirled around there and found, I think, Duchesne breaking the other way. I mean, they had some moments last night, but it just wasn't good enough. And to me, as good as they were in games 3 and 4 and as big as they were responding to that moment, I kind of left last night's game wanting a little bit more from that group. And, I mean, frankly, at this point, that's just what it is with those guys, that you're always left wanting more. And that's a big-time discussion, a big-time decision that David Poile and the Predators are going to have to make this offseason. I don't know what you do about it, and we're going to have plenty of time to break down how you handle Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene specifically. We'll have a lot of time to get to that this offseason. But to me, that is a massive question, maybe the number one question heading into this team this offseason is what happens, if anything, with those two guys. And when we come back, we'll continue the discussion on the Predators. Was this series against Carolina a success? What do we take away against this series against Carolina for the Predators as they move forward here? We'll get into that coming up next. This is Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Oh, yeah, baby. Welcome back in. Robbie and Rex Road here on ESPN 102.5. The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rex Road, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. I can't believe I made it 33 minutes through this show without bringing up one time that Scott Stapp was in the house last night performing with the house band there at Bridgestone Arena. What'd you think, Joe Rex Road? Seen a little bit of Creed action in person last night.
Yeah. And you know, Scott Stapp plays Bridgestone, Preds lose, crushing heartbreaker. Coincidence, link.
Well, see, I'd go the other way with that. I mean, after Scott Stapp played in the first intermission, they're on fire. Came out, scored 2 straight goals, won that period. So maybe have him out there again for the second intermission, and we're not having this conversation today.
Well, that's true. My buddy and friend of the show, Luke DeCock, was actually in the house from the News Observer.
Yeah.
And he tweeted, if the Canes have a big third period, I think you can blame Creed. That Scott Stapp is just too good to play 2 periods.
Apparently so.
Though again, like the catalog is shallow. So if a catalog exists at all. So
it exists.
It does exist, yes. It was what a weird life. I was like, I gotta go somewhere. I'm sitting here and Scott Stapp is just a few feet away from me screaming into a microphone. I did not sign up for this.
Well, I think the entire arena last night tweeted at you when he came on the stage there. Look, I know this has been something for a long time that you've been waiting to check off your bucket list, and I'm so excited that the Predators made this happen for you last night. It was awesome.
Yeah, I have never seen Foo Fighters, for example, a band that I would love to see, but now I've seen Creed.
Yes,
Never got to see Nirvana. I still haven't seen Pearl Jam. I can go down the list of bands that I wish I had seen that I haven't, but now I got Creed. So
you can die a happy man.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, don't you worry. I mean, that's not going to be the last time you hear a Creed song today. We've got a couple more to throw your way. So I know you're excited about that.
That's fine. I've got this Detroit Lions coffee mug and can take on all comers. So
that's right. Absolutely. So I guess, Joe, the big question now in the immediate aftermath of the series being over last night, the Predators fall in 6 games to Carolina. 4 straight games go to overtime. And, we found this out last night too. That's the 3rd time in the history of the playoffs that 4 straight games have gone to overtime. At least 4 straight have gone to overtime in a series. So obviously a very competitive series. It was tight the whole time. I think the Predators should be, to some degree, proud of the effort they put out there against Carolina. The question is, what does that mean moving forward? Like, what's the big takeaway from the Predators' standpoint in this series against Carolina? I think part of that answer is still yet to be written. We'll see what Carolina is able to do against Tampa Bay coming up. But just your initial thoughts, Joe, on what the takeaway is from the Predators' point of view. Is this a success? We talked about the trade deadline and the decision not to sell at that point. Given what you saw out of them against Carolina, is this season, based on the entire ride, everything that happened, is this a success with this group?
No, I mean, you don't, because you were so – look, the Preds have pointed to this a lot. It's fine because it is a massive contrast, but because you were so crappy early does not mean now you can change like the preseason outlook, and change what a success would be. No, it's not a success. Now, look, I wrote it at The Athletic. I'll say it many times today. The Preds overachieved in this series, in my mind, and it's been a long time. It's been playoff disappointment, underachieving after disappointment / underachieving for this team. So that is progress. I think you can make progress without saying this was a success.
Agreed.
So, going into the year, I think we thought that they might be, looking at the 4th spot in that division. Maybe some people thought they could be like 3rd. Most people had Dallas, obviously, in the playoffs. I mean, it was a surprising season. There's always something that's surprising. But if you go into the year with this team and say first-round playoff loss, no one is going to say, oh, successful. I think a lot of people were kind of open-minded and saying, well, let's see. They're trying to be harder to play against. You hope there's a youth movement. Those were the two phrases. And actually, both of those things did happen. Not necessarily in a linear way. Some of it was forced, but it wasn't, I guess, in the end, all that far from what you thought it might be. The way it got there was no one could have predicted exactly. But no, I can't call that a success. I think a success for this franchise at this point has to involve a playoff series win, which, of course, has not taken place since 2018.
I agree. I mean, it's very difficult to call this season a success. Now, look, it's also not the complete and total failure that it appeared it was going to be at one time in this season. So I think there is some middle ground there that you can reach. And look, you can make the argument that the trajectory with this group, I think, looks a lot better right now than it did, heading into this season. I mean, heading into this season, yes, I picked the Predators to finish fourth, and I didn't think that they were going to be a Stanley Cup contender by any means. So it's not like, I had Stanley Cup expectations for this group coming into the season, but the trajectory was pointing a pretty clear direction with this group. They were getting worse, and they were going down, and I think, we talked about it yesterday, late February, early part of March, that was rock bottom for this team, and they looked like one of the worst teams in the NHL, and they turned it around. They got to this point. It was a great series against Carolina. So I think you can feel good about the direction the team is heading to some degree, while still recognizing that it's hard to call a season a success when you lose in 6 games in the first round of the playoffs, and especially, and I keep coming back to this, when the core of your team still theoretically should be in the prime of their careers. Like, you're going to be hard-pressed to sell me on a success when you got Johansson and Duchesne and Forsberg and Arvidsson and Ellis and Ekholm, all these different guys, Yossi, still in the prime of their career. So it's a difficult kind of gauge to have with this Predators team. We're going to get it today on the text line. I'm sure we've already gotten it to some degree of this was a total failure. You're out in the first round against Carolina, and you're not really all that close to being a Stanley Cup contender. I'm not saying that those people are absolutely wrong. I mean, I don't know how close this Predators team is to being a Stanley Cup contender, but I think you're going to see opinions from the fan base today all over the map, and we saw that last night, Joe, I think in the immediate aftermath of the game as well.
Yeah, no doubt, and that's what it should be. It's again, some of it is your outlook. I will say that this season was a success in some ways. Okay,
yeah,
it was a success in terms of locating some things. The Preds located a goalie. They identified that UC Saros he's a keeper. Now, at some point, Askarov is going to be up, and we'll see what happens. But you feel good about your starting goaltender. To me, now I know this opinion may be contested by some, but to me, the Preds found a coach.
Yeah,
I think John Hines proved a lot this year. I understand, you can look at various decisions and nitpick that, and that's fine. No one's saying he's perfect or the greatest coach in the history of the NHL, but I think he proved a lot. I think he got what is it? What's coaching? I mean, he got more out of some guys than they were giving, and quite a few, and got that group to collectively play together at a pretty high level. And they found some other players that I won't go through the whole list right now, but they found some guys who I think are definitely going to be part of this moving forward. So from that perspective, I mean, certainly you could do a lot worse than that. But yeah, the overall, the quality of the team and where it is, and of course we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but can this basic group push forward and just play like they did the second half and win at that clip next year? Well, if that's the case, then it could be a different kind of story come the postseason. I just don't know that they can.
Well, I don't know either, and I'll add one to that list that you just threw out there, and some of this has to do with the coaching as well. But the Predators, I mean, I feel like they found an identity as well, a pretty clear identity, and you heard John Hines bring that up, I don't know, probably 12 times in the postgame press conference last night. I mean, there's a pretty clear formula that he wants this group to play, and I think we saw that if you do that and you buy in more times than not, they were successful coming down the stretch here. Now, there's still got to be talent that goes along with that. And as we said, there's a lot of questions to answer this offseason that we're going to have plenty of time to discuss. But I do think the Predators found a pretty clear identity, and that's been missing from this group over the last couple of years. We'll continue this discussion when we come back. Bob, hang with us on our phone line. We'll get to you first thing coming up next. You're listening to Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Race fans, the iconic Indy 500 is this Sunday, and the Big Machine Vodka Music City Grand Prix, along with 102.5 The Game, invites you to our official Indy 500 watch party at Scoreboard Bar and Grill. Come watch the race, win Music City Grand Prix tickets and swag, plus check out the Big Machine Vodka Indy racing car on display. There'll be great drink specials from your friends at Bud Light Seltzer and live music all day long. It's the Big Machine Vodka Music City Grand Prix Indy 500 watch party this Sunday at 11 a.m. at Scoreboard Bar and Grill. Welcome back in, Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, taking your thoughts to the Predators being eliminated last night by the Carolina Hurricanes. They fall 4-3 in overtime. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Let's go to our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Bob from Antioch, who's been waiting patiently. Bob, thanks for calling into Robbie and Rex Road.
Good morning, guys. I'm giving you the perspective of a day one, year one season ticket holder fan. I don't know if you guys were at the game in March. It was a Saturday game when Florida just demoralized us, like I think it was 6-2.
Oh, yeah.
Or something like that. So that's my frame of reference regarding how I feel about last night. Compared to how I felt going out of there in early March, I mean, last night was almost like a gift. You know, it was a very pleasant surprise, and I'm a lot more optimistic about the team now. Obviously, you can't wave a magic wand and change everything in one season. But at the beginning of the year, I felt like the group was stale because it had gotten away from the Predator identity, and so given how things were at the beginning of the year, and also obviously that game in early March, I feel quite optimistic about the future. I realize the flaws of the team, the things that need to be addressed, but I'm much more optimistic than I was, and basically I see that there are three different segments of the team. There's the core group that you just mentioned, Forsberg and all those guys, and then you've got the young guys, Carrier, Olivier, Janot, Tolvanen, et cetera. Then you got the group in the middle. And in my opinion, they're really not going to be able to get rid of Duchesne and Johansson. To me, any changes that have to come from that middle group that I just mentioned, and I like to know. I've got two questions. Are you guys more optimistic than pessimistic, and do you think that the changes will come from that middle group?
Hey, thanks for the call, Bob. We appreciate that. I mean, I think to Bob's point there, Joe, it's going to be difficult, I think, to just rid yourself of either a Ryan Johansson contract or a Matt Duchene contract. I think there still is like this segment of the Predators fan base and the population that thinks that, all right, well, just let Matt Duchene go to Seattle, and that solves that problem, and his contract is just going to be out from underneath you at that point. And I'm just telling you, it's not going to be that simple. Like, if Matt Duchene ends up going in expansion, I got to think somebody else is going along with him that you probably don't want to give up. Like, to me, that's a lot of money for Seattle just to take on at this point. Maybe they need it to get to the cap floor. I don't know how they're going to approach this expansion draft. So I'm not saying it's impossible that one of those two guys ends up on the Kraken, but I think if you're just absolutely relying on that one of those two guys is not going to be here next year based on the expansion draft, I think you're setting yourself up for some disappointment if you're the Predators and a Predators fan. I think it's going to be a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, it won't be easy, that's for sure. And to Bob's point, and Bob, thanks for, Bob always brings good perspective and questions and points, and I agree with the way he broke it down. The interesting thing about the middle group is it's some of the best players in this series.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, Nick Cousins, who didn't play the whole series, was awfully good. Eric Halla was awfully good. Mm-hmm. Halla and Cousins together, I mean, the Carolina Hurricanes, I promise you, hate those two guys more than anybody else in the NHL right now. Well, they probably don't love the herd line either, but I mean, they
but even those guys, like Colton Sissons, I don't consider like a core guy here. It's hard for me to consider, a fourth liner a part of the core here, but I thought he had a pretty good series for the most part. Calle Jarnkrok, like, is he part of the core with this group? I don't know. I mean, that would be, I guess, left up to interpretation for everybody. But I agree to Bob's point, you're probably going to have to move around the middle. Now, I still think, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more today, like I think to some degree the core group needs to be shaken up a little bit, and we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about that heading into the offseason here. But I also think that could be very difficult to accomplish.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it's a good question. Like Sissons and Jarnkrok, I mean, they are core. They're longtime players. I mean, they've been with this crew the whole time through all this sort of this era here, kind of rising up to get to the Stanley Cup final, and then what's happened since then. But they're not like what I would. I mean, to me, it's the guys who make more money. I mean, it's Ellis Yossi. I mean, Ekholm, of course, was very attractive as a trade piece. But I would probably put them in the middle group. The thing is, I like what a lot of those guys do. I think they do what you want people in those positions to do for you. I mean, the problem is that the people in the positions, the elevated positions, aren't doing it. And there's no clear solution. We got Ben blowing up our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, doing the y'all love David Poile stuff. Keeping the team together was wrong. Not even close to a success. Would have been swept if Slavin played. Also, there's no in between. Should have sold, prepared for the future, or you're trying to make it deep and contend. Well, we both said that they should have sold at the trading deadline. But a second round. Here's a question for a Preds fan: would you rather have like an extra second round pick right now, or none of this experience? Now, look, I guess an answer back might be, okay, who's the second round pick? Because that's what Yossi was, But this experience, is this not what it's about? I mean, it's not about losing. You want to advance, but I mean, you were in an incredible series against one of the top teams in the league and had 3 unbelievable nights in that building. Is there not value in any of that?
Let's go back to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Scott to Robbie and Rexford. Scott, thanks for calling in. What's up?
Hey, good morning, guys. Let me be the voice of some of those texters. I'm not quite as optimistic as Bob from Antioch. I think we messed up not getting what we could get at the trade deadline and selling off some people. And to be quite honest, if a team was willing to give me a decent used Zamboni, I would give them Johansson and Duchesne. And that's all I've got.
Thanks for the call, Scott. I mean, look, I hear what he's saying there. Problem is, I don't know what team is going to want Johansson or Duchesne right now. You've got to have a partner to trade with. That's the thing. I mean, look, it sounds great to get that money and get those contracts out of here. The problem is, based on what they're paid and the production they brought to the table, I mean, teams are not going to be breaking down the door to go trade for Matt Duchesne and Ryan Johansson. I mean, that's just a simple fact of the matter. Now, we've seen this happen before. I mean, their talent is still intriguing, I think, to people. Ryan Johansson, very talented player. I think we know that. Matt Duchesne, as much as we've talked about Matt Duchesne this year and the flaws that he has, he's still a very talented player. So maybe you can find a team that's willing to take one of those two on. But right now, it feels like to me the Predators are stuck with those two right now. And unless they get creative, I think they might continue to be stuck with those two as they head into next year. And if that's the case, you've just got to hope that John Hines eventually can break through to those two guys, and we can see more of the Ryan Johansson that we saw in the first part of his Predators career. Ryan Johansson, up until basically last regular season, was pretty good for this team. And ever since then, the production's just not been there. Matt Duchesne, the production's not been there from the start. I mean, those are two huge problems that you've got to find a way to address somehow if you're the Predators. Whether that's one of those two not being here next year, or if they are here, you've got to find some way to get them to be what they've been in their career, and that is productive players. Because if you can't, I mean, that's way too much money tied up down the middle that's not bringing you anything at that point.
Well, I have more optimism on the Johansson front in both ways. Not saying that he's been at all in the last couple of seasons what he needs to be, but still think there's a lot there. And I also think that he could be attractive to someone. I do. I think Duchesne is the tougher situation. He moves to the wing. I mean, Vingen brought this up in the pregame, or I don't know. It's just a total tapestry of radio yesterday. But Vingen brought up that that Duchesne needed the 2 goals in the last game to have more goals than Tanner Jeannot this year. Tanner Jeannot, the guy who started playing in April,
right,
on the fourth line. I feel like it would be very tough to unload Duchesne on someone right now. Could be wrong on both fronts. I think Johansson could be more of an opportunity, but the problem is, I think of the two, if I was picking, if I was Dave Poyle, and again, it's just Dore B, to take all, conditions the same, I mean, I would keep Johansson.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So this is going to be a fascinating offseason for David Poyle. And speaking of that, how much change do you think is required for the Predators as they head into this offseason and head into kind of looking towards building towards their future for next year? We'll get into that coming up next. You're listening to Robbie and Rexroad live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, hour number 2 of Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexroad, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, reacting to a Game 6 loss in overtime for the Predators last night. They fall 4-3 to Carolina. Their season now over. Predators eliminated last night at home at Bridgestone Arena. Taking your thoughts all show long on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. So, Joe, now a big question that the Predators are faced with as they head into the offseason now is what happens next? How much change is needed with this group? And it's interesting because halfway through this season, we thought a lot of change was needed with this Predators group. We were talking about a rebuild, tearing this thing down, reconstructing the roster, and maybe going into a multi-year process here of where younger players are coming in, you're completely rebuilding, and you're trying to figure out how to get your team, through a youth movement here and back to a place where it can be competitive. That's changed to some degree since the Predators turned things around and now find themselves in a competitive series against Carolina coming out of the other side of it. I still believe, though, Joe, that changes are going to need to be made this offseason. Like, I don't think the Predators, it would serve them well to just roll this group back out there next year and maybe add, Tomasino to the mix. Maybe Pitlick is added to the mix as well. But that's really the main changes that are made. And more or less, it's the same group out there next year. I've seen some Predators fans that want to see that happen, and I understand why. But I still think when the larger picture in mind, there has been too much regression out of this core group for me to just leave it alone heading into next year. And there are a couple interesting guys, and we've talked about Johansson and Duchesne. Those are going to be the main two talking points this offseason to see what happens with those two guys. But there are a couple of more guys to me that I would consider a part of this core that are very interesting. And those two guys are Ryan Ellis and Victor Arvidsson. Because Victor Arvidsson especially, a guy that, you ask any Predators fan this time a year and a half ago, Victor Arvidsson may be their favorite player, and he may be, in some opinions, the best player the Predators had out there. He just doesn't look like the same guy. And I get it. He played, I think, in 2 games in this series before he got hurt again. And, it just seems like this is a constant theme now with Victor Arvidsson where he's getting hurt on a yearly basis. And when he's been in there, the speed burst just doesn't look like it's the same. I would not be surprised, even given his contract, if the Predators try to move him this offseason. I'm very interested to see what happens with their defensemen because, David Poile said at the deadline when he made the decision to hold on to Matthias Ekholm and to not sell at the deadline, David Poile said it in the press conference. He's got a plan for the expansion draft, and in his words, he is not going to lose Matthias Ekholm in the expansion draft. Well, what does that mean for everybody else? Are you protecting 4 defensemen at that point? Is Ryan Ellis still somebody that's a part of this core moving forward here? I think it's fair to characterize Ellis's last few years here as very up and down. He's been very good at times. I think he's been pretty bad at times as well. What do you do with Ryan Ellis as you move forward here? Those two guys, to me, Joe, it's very interesting to see what's going to happen with those two as they move into this offseason this year.
Yeah, I think it's fair to point those two out. I think Arvidsson in particular has kind of moved into, the situation where I could see it making sense for them to try to move him, and I think that they could get something back. I'm sure there's a variety of opinions around the league about him. One, just about his size, but also, all the things that we see about Victor Arvidsson in the last couple of years, everyone else sees too. So what would he fetch? I don't know. That's a move you can make. I'm still dubious about the idea that they want to move on from Ellis. But to your point in the expansion draft, are you going 4-4-1? For anybody who doesn't know, you can protect 7 forwards and 3 defensemen, or you can protect 4 forwards and 4 defensemen.
Yep.
I would expect that. I would expect the latter. But maybe something changes on that front, and they have interest in moving on from Ellis. That would certainly financially be relief. And that's the thing is, they may not be able to do any of these big things, and maybe just sitting there going into a season saying, well, maybe Johansson and Duchesne will put it all together this year. That might be what happens, and if that's the case, one thing I think that diminishes some of the excitement and optimism over this team and what it has accomplished. And also it makes it tougher to add anything significant that might make a difference. And we haven't even talked yet about Mikal Granlund, who to me has to be a major priority to try to re-sign him. You also have to pay UC Saros more. Some would argue quite a bit more.
Yeah.
Than $1.5 million. We were in the, like in the press room last night. Venga and I were, kind of talking about that, and he thought maybe something like Grubauer's deal, like 3 years, $10 million or something would work there. I'm like, well, that'd be pretty sweet for the Preds if that's the case. I mean, maybe I'm overthinking what Saros did this year, but that's still going to be an increase, So, I think you're right. Those two guys make sense. I have my doubts that Ellis is someone that the Preds would seriously consider moving, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, at some point you gotta think about something else dramatic if you can't get the obvious done here, which you may not be able to.
Well, that's my thing. Like at some point, you're going to have to move on from somebody that you probably don't want to move on from. And look, that's tough to do as a general manager, and I understand that. But you can't, to me, you can't just continually keep trotting this same core back out here and expecting that the results are going to look dramatically different. I mean, look, they've had a good run together, but they've not been a true competitor for a Stanley Cup in 3 years now. I mean, this has been something. It's not like, you're building towards being right on the edge of being a contender for the Stanley Cup. So, at some point, to me, you can't just continue to trot out that same core. Like they've done pretty much everything else at this point, and we've talked about this many times. They've nibbled around the edges with this core. And look, I think this turnaround's been really impressive, and maybe that changes to some degree the level of changes that you make this offseason if you're the Predators. But I would find it hard to believe that the plan for success moving forward is just, throw that core back out there, and hopefully, Philip Tomasino and Rem Pitlick come in, and that's the difference with this group. I don't think that's a formula for success if that's the way they go this offseason.
Well, I agree. I mean, and you think about different players who I guess a notch below, who like Bob said, sort of the middle group.
Yeah.
You could like if I'm Seattle, a guy that I'd be interested in at his salary and what he does for you would be like a guy like Colton Sissons.
Yep.
Potentially. So you have to think about him. You obviously have, Fabro. I mean, what do you think about Fabro moving forward? There's another guy who, John Hines to me last night, I thought he made a pretty strong case that, and I know, very few coaches are going to say, yeah, we pretty much given up on that guy, but I thought he made a pretty strong case for why they believe in Fabro still. And that doesn't surprise me. I still think he could be a very good player. The history of – it's very clear the history of David Poile with forwards is not good enough in terms of drafting, developing. But the history of defensemen tells me, like, he's probably going to end up being pretty good.
Yeah.
But that's another thing to consider when you're talking about who you're protecting and what you're doing around the expansion draft. You have a year of Cousins next year. You have another year of Cunnin next year, and I think Cunnin's a nice young player.
Yeah.
I think you look at the move to get him, and it looks like it could be good. How about Eric Halla? He's probably gonna be somewhere else next year, but man, how important was that guy down the stretch for this team?
Yeah, he's crucial. Absolutely, and I agree. Like, Eric Halla, to me, is probably going to be a victim of the numbers game. Like, you can't bring everybody back this summer. I agree. Granlund is going to have to be a priority for this team. And I I don't see a spot for Eric Halla coming back. Not that he doesn't deserve it, because I thought he was awesome coming down the stretch. But to my point earlier, you can't keep everybody, and that's the challenge that David Poile is going to have to face this offseason. There are some really tough decisions that he's going to have to make, and it's time to get your thoughts on those decisions as well. If you're David Poile and the Predators, how much change do you think is required with this group as they head into the offseason? What changes would you make? Let us know on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. We'll get to that coming up next. ESPN 94.9 is the home for Nashville Sounds baseball. Tonight, the Sounds are on the road and will face the Columbus Clippers, the AAA affiliate of the Cleveland Indians. The pregame show with Jeff Hemp starts at 5:50, and first pitch is at 6:05. Nashville Sounds baseball on ESPN 94.9, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans and by 312 Pizza Company. We'll be right back here on Robbie and Rex Road here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robbie and Rex Road here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Talking Nashville Predators, what changes need to be made this offseason? How much different should this Predators team look as they head in to next season? Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Joe got a texter that says, Robbie, you obviously don't realize most hockey clubs don't make the playoffs during a rebuild. The Preds had to transition to the new coach. This is a pretty good start considering we almost knocked out the Canes. Dump Arvidsson, Harper, Duchesne, Pekka maybe, Fabro, and Sissons. This also coming from the same person yesterday that said, I don't know hockey. So there's that.
What? Sissons. Yeah, dump Sissons. What's that guy ever done for this team? And he gets paid too much, too.
Dump Fabro, 22
Robbie,
years
will
old.
you learn about hockey, please?
Yeah,
please learn about hockey at some point, Robbie.
Dump
hey,
your
real
first round
quick
pick at
before
22 years old. That'll go well.
Oh my God. Hey, by the way, Elijah, nice job on the Bowie. You're not playing enough Creed, though. I just
we'll
want to
have
throw
more.
that out there.
Oh,
buddy.
I got to save it. I can't just empty the clip in the first hour of the show. I mean,
Well, they have so many amazing songs. What do you mean?
Well, we do.
I mean,
Yeah.
they've got like what, a box set full of amazingness, don't they?
they have a thick catalog that I've busted open here in the wholesaling studios powered by Remlon.com.
Elijah, do we think that Rex Road hates Creed because it's cool to hate Creed, or do we think he actually hates it? Because I think some level of him
I think it's 50-50.
enjoyed watching Scott Stapp last night on that band stage. I really do.
The bit's
cool.
hard
Wait,
not
wait.
to enjoy.
Wait. It's cool to hate Creed? What do you mean? Like,
Yeah.
That's a cool thing?
Oh, yeah. Everybody,
Is this like on TikTok or
no,
something?
like everybody claims that they hate Creed and hate Nickelback, which obviously is not the case. I mean, they didn't make all this money by accident, so somebody likes them. But I've never met one person who's like, you know what? I kind of like Creed and Nickelback.
No one ever asked to turn on Creed or Nickelback.
Right.
Like it's now like the trendy thing not to like them because it hasn't aged very well.
Exactly.
I'm gonna go back to about the year 2000 for you. Okay. And I'm gonna call out a friend of mine. I haven't talked to him in a long time. His name is Drew Chabot. And one night I had an impassioned, and it was actually another buddy of mine ganged up with me on him, just almost a screaming match because he told us that like this Creed album was like one of the great rock albums of the last few years. I'm like, it's the worst crap I've ever heard. What are you talking about? No, I am an OG Creed hater. Don't ever think I'm doing this because it's popular. I am an OG CH. Okay.
All right. Look, I believe you. I just think there are some people that deep down they kind of like Creed. They're just afraid to say it.
Or they're
I
a
think
little
we've seen
nostalgic with Creed.
that. Yeah.
Hey, now listen. Now I've been accused of music snobbery too. I will rock Hall & Oates all day. Give me some Culture Club Karma Chameleon, okay? I like plenty of music that people would say is not good or is not, or is like I can't find my words today.
It's easy to hate or hasn't aged well.
Yeah, well,
but that's aged well though.
Cheesy music. Well, okay. Look, I like plenty of stuff that people would not like, okay, or isn't considered good or whatever. But like we should all collectively as a country, really as a world, maybe even as a universe, be able to listen to Creed's music and realize it sucks.
I think we're being a little harsh on Scott Stapp last night. I think we're being a little harsh.
Hey, I
on the
appreciate
program.
Scott for showing up, and he sounded good for whatever his age is. I mean, it's been a long time since that music came out. So I mean, he's up there just like I am. So hey, good for him. It seemed like the people enjoyed it. I didn't see a whole arena of people pretending to hate Creed. They were making noise for it. They liked it.
Took him
That's
higher.
fine.
Yeah, took him higher last night in the bowl. There's no question about that. Let's go back to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. The Ultimate Predator texting in, will the cap go up this offseason or stay stagnant again? Will that help increasing contracts? My guess would be it's not going up, and I don't think it's going up anytime in the next couple of years. I think in the NHL, you're going to be dealing with a flat cap for the next couple of years. Now, you do have the new TV deal with ESPN and TNT, and I think eventually that's going to cause this thing to kick back up and probably kick back up significantly when that time comes. I think certainly for this next season and maybe even the season after that, you might be dealing with a flat cap if you're NHL teams.
Yeah, you can't count on anything good in that way in the near term here. Hey, can I go to our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com?
Have at it.
Heidi from Dixon says, how is food fighting considered a band? Heidi, you've used that joke a few times, and yet I still find it charming.
Yes.
The Foo Fighters.
The Foo Fighters food fighting joke.
Yeah. Dave Grohl, tuning his guitar in a tinny warehouse for like a minute is better than the entire Creed catalog. I'm sorry.
Wow.
I'm sorry, Creed. I should stop.
He got really triggered last night by Scott Stapp being on that band stage. He really did. Jeez.
Why can't he play another? He can't play another set.
Like, I agree with
you. They played great after he played.
Yes, they did. They played very well in the second period after Scott Stapp was on the band stage. Joe, as you look ahead to the offseason here, how much change do you think is required with this group? I mean, you've got the balance of, the young guys that have come in, they've played well, the core group that we've talked a lot about here today on the show. I think there's also some room and more room for some more upward mobility for young guys. Like, I think Philip Tomasino is going to be ready next year. I think Rem Pitlick is ready. Like, I think they're ready to play in the NHL. So with all those things in mind, how much change do you think is required for the Predators this offseason to continue to try to build in a direction where they can get back to Stanley Cup contention?
Well, quite a bit. But this is where it gets really difficult because, like, again, I like how Bob put it earlier, you get this 3 groups. Like some of those middle group guys, I think you don't want to change that. Where you want to change it is where it's hardest to change it. And so I would say, yes, something big has to happen to shake it up. But if you can't pull it off with Duchene and Johansson, and again, I'm going to tell you, like, I'm not 100% sold that you want to move on from Johansson at this point. I know a lot of people are. I think the Duchene signing of 2 years ago is the one that looks like the real problem right now. And it looks kind of like the next Turris for David Poile right now. But I'm not totally sold on like the Johansson, like that you want to move on from him, but something big in there has to change, I think, for this team to be able to play, consistently at the level like a team like Carolina, team like Tampa Bay, the 2 teams that are going to meet in this next round. So, but a lot of the rest of the lineup, the rest of the forward group, I think you want a lot of that back, don't you? I mean, I think you want as much of that back as possible because those guys were actually tremendous in their roles.
I would agree. I mean, I still think you look at this group and, Matt on Periscope says, build around the herd, Saros, Forsberg, Yossi, and Ekholm. Look, I don't want to take anything away from the herd line because they were very good coming down the stretch. But if you're building around your fourth line, that's a problem. Like, you've got to find ways to get more scoring. Like, that's – you still, as good as, the story was for the Predators coming down the stretch, they are still very limited offensively. And it's just tough to win. Like, we saw it in this series. I thought the Predators played extremely well in Game 5 relative to what their game plan was against Carolina. They just don't have enough finish in their lineup. Like, that's got to change as they move forward. I know a big part of that are the 2 guys we've talked about, and that's Johansson and Duchene. But it's more than that. Like, to me, as good as he was this year, like, Calle Jarnkrok is not a top 6 guy. I'm sorry. He's just not. Like, he on a winning Stanley Cup competing team, Calle Jarnkrok does not need to be in the top 6. That's just my thoughts on the matter. And I still think there's some work to do with the secondary scoring guys that have got to be more of a consistent threat. And look, maybe the answer's right there in-house. Like, Tolvanen needs to take another step. Obviously, Philip Tomasino, you're excited about him. And maybe it's just as simple as those 2 guys coming in and, Tolvanen takes that next step. He's more consistent, and Tomasino's ready to go right from the jump. I don't know. It could be that simple for the Predators. But I still feel like there are some pretty heavy strides they need to take in terms of their scoring punch.
Well, yeah, look, Carolina has 3 lines of guys who can score.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but I hear what you're saying about not building around the herd line. Don't call it that then. But still, like, you feel good about it, right?
Sure.
You feel good about what you're paying them, and you feel good about what they do, and you want. I mean, to me, that's something you're bringing back, and you feel good about. Great, you don't have to mess with that. But yeah, of course. I mean, the bigger issue is at the top, with where the money is and where the production isn't. And I agree with you. It's finishes. It's not there, and I'd say this is not a small sample size at this point. This is a problem. And it's a problem that just will not be easy to solve. There's just no easy answer. The fact that there's an expansion draft at least gives you one more outlet. If not for that, what would we be talking about? I mean, you can't keep buying contracts out.
Yeah.
You know, you're paying an extra $2 million a year for the next several years because the Kyle Turris thing blew up in your face. So at least the expansion draft gives you some possible escape route.
We'll continue the discussion on the Predators when we come back. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. That's coming up next. Right now, though, got to tell you about my friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. And look, we've all had that dream. It's a tie game. Bottom of the ninth, the bases are loaded. And on FanDuel Sportsbook, I'm here to tell you, you get more than one shot to swing for the fences because FanDuel is letting you place your first bet risk-free. That's right, new users get up to $1,000 back in site credit if your first bet doesn't win. There's a reason FanDuel Sportsbook is America's #1 sportsbook. The app, so simple to use. They've got great odds on all different betting markets, fun bet types like the same game parlay, and always on promotions to let you get more action out of every game day. And when you win on FanDuel, they pay you your winnings safely in as little as 24 hours. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today and sign up with promo code ROB to get in on the action. That's FanDuel Sportsbook. Promo code ROB. Must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. First online real money wager only for first risk-free bet. Refund issued is non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Restrictions apply. See sportsbook.fanduel.com for details. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. That was Predators head coach John Hines after the game last night, discussing the series against Carolina. Joe Rexrode now in deep concentration on our feed on Periscope, YouTube, and on Twitch as well, with a little bit of Creed bringing us back in here again. Man, what a day this is today here on the show. We've all gotten, 45 minutes of sleep last night. A couple of times we've had Creed already on the program. We're off to a hot start today, Rexrode.
It's just an endless happy hour.
Keep
it rocking, Elijah.
Joe! Yes. Please play that again.
Joe!
Please. Oh, yes. Did you hear this audio from Stillman yesterday, Rexrode?
No, what?
Play it again.
Oh, Joe!
That was sent to me without context, so I couldn't tell you what the context was, but all I know was that. I
think I know what that was. So I went to Belmont's basketball. Well, it's not just basketball, but the new athletic facility, which is amazing. They had their grand opening yesterday, and Jared was there too. So, and I'm going to send you the video, actually, Elijah. So you can tweet if you like. So, tour the facility again. I'm like it's really impressive. The new facility. But we went to the weight room, and Jared sees all this weight equipment that apparently has never been used, and he asks if he can do some pull-ups. Okay, so the woman who's sort of guarding the room is I'm not going to say anything. So I will say, Jared, he ripped off a few pull-ups. It was very impressive.
There you go.
And so I was taking video, but I actually forgot to hit. And truly. It was an honest mistake. I forgot to hit the red button, so I got the last two. So he was very upset about that I didn't that I didn't get the full impressive just show of brawn. That's
probably what
athleticism.
That was. You let him down.
Joe!
I'm never going to get tired of hearing that. Let's go back to our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Rod in Clarksville texting in. Agree with Robbie on scoring punch, but we have to start with the top line. Our first line may not be a strong second line on a contender. This may mean a major rebuild, but if we don't, we will stay in the middle of the pack. This coming from Rod in Clarksville. Joe, what do you think of that?
Well, no, I mean that's the conundrum here is that sometimes 2 years ago, what were we all talking about? Yeah, they're probably going to need to move on from Subban.
Yeah.
And that deal. Also, it's probably a time, finally, for the Matt Duchene experiment to happen. And both things happened. There are obviously off seasons where you don't see something coming 3 years before that when it was Weber for Subban, which was a deal that I think was a big part of them getting in the Stanley Cup final next year. And frankly, it's the last major deal Poile has done that was successful. But we know the problem, I think, or at least the general area of the problem. And I agree with that assessment, but how do you fix that? You're not bringing in people who can make a dent in that unless you can move on from someone you may not be able to move on from. And Tomasino, look, there's excitement about him, and it would be great for the Preds if he's ready next year. It would be great for the Preds if he's a really good player. But are you counting on him being the 35, 40 goal guy here real quickly? I think he's probably got a chance to be in your top six. But you're putting an awful lot on the Tomasino train if you don't find someone more proven at forward. Again, you can't even begin to look for those guys until you move others who won't be easy to move. It's not easy.
No, it's not easy. And look, I mean, there's still the money part of this too. Not only the money that Johansson and Duchene are making, that you've got to figure out what's going to happen there, but also you've got to sign Forsberg to another deal coming up. You've got to sign Ekholm to another deal coming up. Granlund, what's going to happen with him as well? I mean, there are still some pretty heavy financial decisions, not to mention, UC Saros as well. I mean, there are a lot of decisions financially that you're going to have to make this offseason if you're David Poile. What happens with your backup goaltender? Is Pekka coming back for another year? If so, what does that cost the Predators? If it's not going to be Pekka, who's going to be the backup goaltender? Are you comfortable with a Connor Ingram who, I mean, on the ice, I think you like what's there, but off the ice, he's had some issues this year. Or do you go and get, a veteran backup goaltender to back up UC Saros? I mean, there are a lot of pretty heavy financial decisions that the Predators are going to have to make this offseason, where I'm not sure how much different the roster can look as they move into next year, even though I think we all agree there's got to be some changes that are made.
Right. So, I mean, look, last night, a lot of the talk, I think there was a little bit, maybe too much of from maybe especially from Ellis, a little bit from Johansson of we hung with this team and we're so proud.
Yeah, that stuff's really got to stop. Like, I get it, and it was one thing after the Arizona series, and that was, quite frankly, just brutal to listen to from some of these guys. And look, you may believe that, but we got to stop with this. Hey, we were right there hanging in with teams after you get beat in a playoff series. Like, that's fine, and in this case, like, I buy into that a lot more than I did against Arizona, but nobody wants to hear that after a first-round series loss.
No. Now again, it's a lot more excusable after this, hanging with this team, than hanging or outplaying Arizona. I mean, no, who cares? You should have beat Arizona. No one thought you were going to beat this team. There was a lot to like about how you played. And look, I mean, I thought Ellis's quote was interesting. I think he basically said we lost the Predator way, and kind of found it again. Talked about work ethic. Players and coaches are going to focus on that. They're going to focus on, we can do more. We can get ourselves better. We can be collectively better. Like if you're John Hines, you have players who are on the roster, and then you work with them. But that's part of the equation. But I mean, no one. I don't think this core group is going out and having a great offseason, and all of a sudden you're going to transform, this finishing problem. This, like you said, this offensive problem with your top two lines, and really it comes down to if you can't move those guys, you're just going to have the faith that they are going to break out of this. John Hines has pushed a lot of buttons, but how do you have confidence? Again, me more with Duchesne. How do you have confidence that Duchesne is going to be that guy? Johansson to me is still. It's a harder one to pick through. There's a lot I still like about his game and what he brings to this team.
Well, there's a lot I still like, but it's got to be better in the regular season. I mean, I thought he was fine in this playoff series, but he's just not good enough anymore in the regular season, and that's got to change.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, no question. Now, would you take so and then no, he's going to be a beast every time in the postseason? You would, but it's still like you got to have more, because you're going to be in a better position for the postseason if he gives you full years like that. And there's no excuse to not be more consistent at that higher level. Duchesne, though, I just don't know. I just don't know if Duchesne right now has got it in him to be even like the 50, 55, 60-point guy that he was consistently. I don't know if that's in his future.
No, I don't know that it is either. And that to me that's very concerning this early in that contract. I think we kind of expected that towards the end of the 7-year contract, given his age when he signed it. But to already be at that point, that is very concerning as you move forward here. I don't think there's any question about that. 102.5 The Game and the Nashville Predators will host a 615-day celebration at Fordyce Center in Bellevue June the 15th that will benefit Boys and Girls Clubs of Middle Tennessee. This all-day event will feature fun for the whole family while paying tribute to Nashville's annual 615 Day, an occasion that pairs Music City's area code with the date of June 15th. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com. When we come back, we need your bold predictions in the world of sports. It's time for Call Your Shot Friday here on Robbie and Rex Road. It could be with the Predators offseason. What moves get made this offseason? Who stays? Who goes? All that on the table. Also, the NBA playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs, still well underway, still in heavy force. So everything on the table for Call Your Shot Friday, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We'll do that next. This is Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. And it is that time of the week here on Robbie and Rex Road. Time for Call Your Shot Friday. We need your bold predictions in the world of sports. A little bit of a different route today. Nashville SC playing this weekend. That's on the table. Predators eliminated yesterday, but off-season moves also on the table as well for Call Your Shot Friday. You can take it to the Titans. Anything you want to take it. It's on the table on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Joe Rexroad, as we recap last week and our edition of Call Your Shot Friday, I know at least one called shot that you absolutely nailed last week. This time a week ago, looking ahead to Game 3 for the Predators in overtime, and you called not only the Predators to win in overtime, but for Matt Duchene to score the goal in overtime. So let's start this edition of Call Your Shot Friday by congratulating you. That was a heck of a called shot you had last week.
It's almost creepy. Like, did I use a Ouija board? But yes, that was one of my called shots. Preds win tonight. Of course, that was a week ago. In overtime, Matt Duchene winning goal. Also, same day, called shot. Grizzlies will shock the Warriors tonight and get the 8 seed. So I got 2 or 3. Now, I also called the shot that the Canes would win Sunday with the Svechnikov goal in overtime. I got the overtime part right.
Yeah.
So I did not get that. Porth shots last week. Titans will trade for Julio Jones, so we'll see. He's saying Rashawn Evans going the other way.
Okay.
He said Preds will score a power play goal with Tolvanen. That did not happen. He said Steph Curry would have 40 versus Memphis. I actually don't remember if that happened or not. They lost. Did he get to 40? He was close.
He was close. I don't know if he got to 40 or not. He was really close, though.
You had a good one. Islanders will win the series against the Penguins. Boom.
They were trailing at that point. Want to point that out.
Yep. And then you had Grizzlies in at the half, but Curry 15 or more in the fourth for the Dubs to win. So no dice there. So there we are.
So that was last week's edition of Call Your Shot Friday. Elijah Campbell in today for Ryan Porth, who will be getting married tomorrow. You should have seen the stress level of Ryan Porth last night in our text chain. That was something to behold. Elijah, would you like to begin today's edition of Call Your Shot Friday?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and kick us off. And I want to continue one that I made the last time I filled in. It is when the Lakers were struggling and reeling and slipping down the Western Conference standings, that they're still going to mess around and find their way in the NBA Finals. So far, that's looking so good. They're up 2-1 after a win last night against Phoenix. And I want to go ahead and double down on that and say they also reached the Finals. And I'm going to add another one, that the Milwaukee Bucks will finish the sweep of Robbie's beloved Miami Heat. And they, not the Brooklyn Nets or the Philadelphia 76ers, will be playing in the NBA Finals this year. Said it on the money line. I said on the money line last week to snag them at plus 900 when they were available. At very, very low odds, they still have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who might be the best player in the NBA still. They have the most defensive versatility of anyone not named the Los Angeles Lakers still playing. Don't sleep on the Bucks. This could be the year they do it.
Joe Rexrode, it's been a really rough go for Miami Heat so far in this series. They've been absolutely destroyed by the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, they had obviously you have the great game and Chris Middleton, a guy who doesn't get talked about enough, by the way, for the Bucks. But kind of looks like the beach is beckoning.
Yeah, it looks like the beach is beckoning.
The fishing poles are beckoning.
That is right. Elijah, do you have any more called shots, or are you good?
No, but I'd also like to remind everybody, too, that at the beginning of baseball season, I said the Padres would win the pennant.
That's
update,
true.
They're 31-18, best team in baseball right now.
That is true. So looking good. So far, so good for Elijah Campbell here on Call Your Shot Friday. Joe Rexrode, your called shots of the week.
Well, I think, it's appropriate today to go ahead and throw the Preds off-season called shot out there. Yep. So I've got one, and it's just this. I can't come up with shots I feel good about on a lot of things, but I'm gonna throw this one out there. Victor Arvidsson will not be a Nashville Predator next season.
Victor Arvidsson,
and I think that's a trade that fetches something for the Preds. They've got a glut. Now they still don't have enough finishers. You could say, gee, you want to move out what's been one of your best offensive players, but I think it's trending that way. I think you can still get something for him. And, a guy like Tomasino, for example, stepping in, I just think that he wouldn't have been in this lineup if he was healthy last night. And that tells you something. Also, the Grizzlies tomorrow will take a 2-1 series lead, and they'll do it on the strength in part of Dylan Brooks scoring 20+. The defensive stopper role player at home always shoots better.
Yeah.
And he can be a maddening player, but I think he's going to go nuts. And my final one is that tonight, it is tonight, right? I think it's tonight. The Minnesota Wild will stun the Golden Knights in Game 7. And yes, the winning goal will go again to the guy who had the winning goal in Game 6. His name is Ryan Hartman.
Ryan Hartman again with the game winner tonight for the Minnesota Wild. I like that. Call Your Shot Friday here. That is Joe Rexrode's version. I will go very quickly. I also had Victor Arvidsson played his last game with the Predators, and we've already seen it. So I say Arvidsson is moved this offseason. I'm going to say Mikhail Granlund will be re-signed by the Predators this offseason. That's a called shot. He'll be back on the Predators this next season. Not only do the Grizzlies win tonight, I say the Grizzlies take down the Utah Jazz in the series. I think the Grizzlies pull off the upset. They take down Utah in the series in what's going to be just a really rough go of things for the top 2 seeds in the Western Conference. I feel bad for the Suns, and I feel bad for the Jazz as well. What do you think about that, Elijah? You don't look very confident.
That's bold.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What we do.
That is bold.
I think the Grizzlies still at least one more. They'll still one more. But I'm not going to bet against the best three-point shooting team in the NBA.
I'm betting against him.
And Robbie is. Robbie's feeling it.
Ja Morant.
That's
He's going to
shot
get it done.
right there.
Now, he did just have 47 points, and they lost.
In a loss.
So maybe not the greatest call.
It's a fun 47.
It was a fun 47. I don't think there's any question about that. Let's go to our 1025 The Game text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Josh texting in, my called shot, Tampa Bay beats Carolina in 5 games. Kucherov will carve up Nedeljkovic with at least 5 goals in the series. So Josh predicting a quick series for Tampa Bay against Carolina, and Nikita Kucherov in 5 games will have 5 goals. I like that. That's a good called shot.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I do think Carolina's going to have to take it up a notch here to win this series. I mean, Tampa Bay it's just a machine now that Kucherov is in there. Yeah. And Vasilevsky, I mean, they're the favorite to win it. And it's tough for the Canes that this is the next series for them, because this is a series that would be good enough at the end.
Melissa from Gallatin texting in, my called shot is that the Minnesota Wild beat the Vegas Golden Knights tonight in overtime, and Kevin Fiala gets the game-winning goal. So Melissa calling a shot. The former Pred, Kevin Fiala, with the game winner tonight. I like that. I think that is well within the realms of possibility.
We're calling all kinds of shots with former Preds scoring huge goals for other teams.
Yes, we are. Andrew on the text line.
How about does anybody have Benino?
Well, maybe so. Maybe that's an option for the Wild tonight as well. Andrew on the text line. This one is a doozy. Philip Forsberg will be traded this offseason. 1 year remaining and can't be paid $8 million a year for missing 75% of the games. Of course, the Predator way might be to re-sign him at $9 million a year for 7 years. But Andrew predicting that Philip Forsberg is traded this offseason. What do you think of that, Rexroad? That's a called shot.
That is a called shot. And listen, I get the thinking there. Like, it doesn't work to just keep saying, okay, here we're extending you, and we extend you.
Yeah.
Forsberg, I think you and I have been aligned that Forsberg has been, I mean, and Yossi has a clause anyway, but I mean, those two guys, you kind of set them aside, right? When you talk about core that you're moving. Hey, if you could get something, it'd be a gamble, because I still like Philip Forsberg a lot, and I think he's a special player. But the injuries, I don't think he did enough in this series. You could make a case for it. It's a good called shot at the very least.
Our buddy Gover on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says Vegas wins 5-0 tonight against Minnesota, and the Leafs end up winning the series, but it takes 7 games. So Montreal stays alive last night to force a Game 6. Gover saying this gets to a Game 7 in Toronto as well, and Vegas hammering the Wild tonight 5-0.
That's probably what'll happen, but you know what? I've been so impressed with the Wild. This series has gone way beyond what I thought it would, so I'm sticking with the Wild.
A very good edition of Call Your Shot Friday. We'll continue to take your called shots all show long on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. When we come back, we will get into the Titans. We'll be joined by Turron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter and host of Talking with TD as well. That's coming up next. This is Robbie and Rexroad live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 3 of Robbie and Rex Road here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rex Road, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Joe Rex Road coming back into the fold here, as you can see on the stream. Joined now, as we are every Friday at 8 o'clock, by our man Turron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of Talking with TD as well, on our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. TD, what's going on, my man? How we doing?
Hey, man, what a day to be alive, man. That's all I could say.
That's all I could say, too. That's always a good start for sure. TD, look, I don't know about you. I've had a lot of fun watching A.J. Brown this week make his various videos and his Instagram messages, TikTok videos, everything of the like, trying to recruit Julio Jones to the Titans. We know that this is probably going to happen via trade, and it's not really in Julio Jones' hands anyway. But what have you thought of A.J. Brown and his recruiting videos for Julio Jones? And what do you think about this Julio Jones saga taking place right now with the Falcons?
Yeah, man, you know, when I talk to A.J. Brown, I always tell him, like, young boy, you get it, man. You understand what it is to connect yourself to a fan base, to media, to other players. That guy really has it together, and you could tell he was raised the right way. And you never see him overreact to, like, stressful situations or anything like that. So I love what he's doing, and it's cool. But the thing that I really feel about it is, you know, he's having fun with it. That's what all the guys are doing. They're having fun with it. Because at the end of the day, Julio Jones can't go to Arthur Blank and Wayne Fontenot and tell them, hey, trade me to the Titans, right? They're going to send Julio Jones to the team or organization that gives them the best compensation. That's really what it boils down to. So as far as when you look at this whole thing, I mean, how could you not want a guy like Julio Jones in your offense? Absolutely, you want that. But you also have to look at, and this is something that I talked to Chris Sanders about for talking with TD this week, you got to understand fit and just see how that would happen, because now you got Todd Downing already trying to maintain the continuity that they had last year, and he would have to tweak some things because Julio Jones, now let's face it, you got that guy in your lineup, you're going to want to give him the ball a lot. And how will that fit in with Derrick Henry, who you want to give touches? We know what happens as he continues to get the football in the fourth quarter. And then A.J. Brown, he's a young dynamite player in his own right. And you got other players who are ascending too. So it's a tough situation. And then not to mention the salary cap issues. You got to push some stuff down the line, and not just enough room to fit him in the cap. You want to fit enough room in case, God forbid, an injury like 2018 with Jonathan Cyprien. They were able to go out and get Kenny Vaccaro, who obviously was a fantastic player for the few years that he was here. So there's a lot to consider with it. On paper, you know, and as a pipe dream, it's something that I know Titans fans are excited about, and they should be.
Yeah, well, pipe dream's probably about right. Long shot. I mean, it's. I feel like there's a lot of other teams, you know, that probably in better position to do this, TD. But
exactly.
In general, if you're you know, John Robinson and you're in talks, because your coworker Diana Rossini, of course, reported that, you know, at least somebody out there has talked first round pick with the Falcons. What would you think would be appropriate, you know, compensation for, of course, taking on that salary? I mean, to me, the Falcons aren't in a position of strength because they are trying to unload that huge cap hit.
Exactly, and that's the thing. You got a team that wants to. It's you know what this is like. You ever go to the boardwalk, right? And it's hot. That heat is beating down on you, and you just, man, you got to cool off. So what do? Especially if you got your son with you. What do? You're going to spend $10 on 2 ice cream cones. You know what I mean? It's an impulse purchase. They got you, and that's how this situation is. So yeah, I think they're crazy if they think they're going to get a first round pick in this situation with the contract and with them really trying to unload it. And now if you have a player who's not disgruntled, but he just feels, you know, his relationship has run its course there. So that's going to be tough. Now for NFL Nation, we did a post where, each of us, well, it ended up being four of us. We made a pitch for Julio Jones. I pitched a third-round pick and Rashad Evans. And, man, I like Rashad Evans as a player. I really do. And I feel that if he stays here, he's going to have a big year. But I just wanted to, make a fair trade, nothing personal. And that's what I offered. And Michael Rothstein, the new Falcons reporter, he almost took it, but he ended up going with a second and a fourth from the 49ers. So that's my value, a third-round pick and a starter, plug and play. I think that would be what they should offer, and I would think that would get the deal done.
The great Turron Davenport on the line with us, presented by Freedom Tire Guys, Nashville's premier mobile tire company, online at freedomtireguys.com. And, TD, we saw Darrington Evans getting some work in at wide receiver. In your opinion, what do you think the next step is for him in this offense? How much more involved do you think he needs to be in the passing game as he heads into year 2 here?
Yeah, I think he's going to be more involved with it. And the thing, and I asked him about, I wasn't sure, so I said, let me just ask him just to double check. He did play some receiver at Appalachian State. So you're getting a guy who, God bless Derrick Henry, but if you put Derrick Henry in the slot, let him run routes or anything like that, it's not going to look pretty, but he is a guy, Darrington Evans, you could put him in there, and he actually looked good yesterday. Watched him through the drills, the box drills, the cones, and, working with all that stuff. And I thought he was pretty impressive. And he's someone that you could go with a 2 running back package, right, and have Derrick Henry in the backfield and motion Evans into the slot, and now you got a matchup issue. Because I would take him against most linebackers. So that's something I think he will be involved. And the thing that you have to remember with him is he's a guy that was a home run hitter at App State. I mean, he had, 3 or 4 70-yard touchdown runs. So that's something. And when you take Derrick Henry out of the game, you don't want to lose a whole lot of that home run ability. And that's kind of where they were without Evans as a guy, because, McNichols is solid, and I think he makes the roster, and Brian Hill is another good one, so it's going to be a competition. But those guys don't give you the home run hitting that Evans brings. So, yeah, I think he's going to be involved, and I think there's going to be a move to – they wanted it last year, right, to not give Derrick Henry the ball so many times, but it's hard to take a guy like that out. So I think if you could give him a breather, get some success with Evans, I think that will further increase his role.
TD, I know you tweeted about Deshaun Kaiser and how he looked throwing the football. Yeah. His arm talent really has never been in dispute, but maybe a guy who can really push Logan Woodside. What else from yesterday stood out to you? I don't think any of the veterans who weren't there surprised any of us. Anyone who did who wasn't there.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go ahead and say this about Kaiser. Let's get it out the way, and I'm going to give you, Jared Stillman, and company, they like to do the Fireball Hot Take Fridays. Well, here you go. Deshaun Kaiser is going to be the backup quarterback.
Ooh, I like
I would put money on that. And there's no slight on Logan Woodside, because when he gets out there, he can make the offense move and do things. But if you look at what he does as far as Kaiser's concerned, he's able to get on the move, similar to what Tannehill does, and that guy can push the ball down the field in the middle of the field, which is something that you don't really have with Woodside. You can stretch the field vertically with Kaiser. And this is all under the, heaven forbid Ryan Tannehill goes down with injury, right? So either way, if that should happen, you're going to really probably punch some walls because they're going to be upset. But still, I think Kaiser will be the backup. Now, as far as guys who weren't there, that surprised me. Honestly, and I'm not knocking them. I respect any player's decision not to be there, but I was very surprised that Rashaan Evans wasn't there. I was very surprised that Tannehill wasn't there. I know some of the guys like Byard, he has some things that were keeping him from being there. He'll be there next week, but some of the leaders on the team, Jeffrey Simmons, I don't know. I would imagine they have valid reasons to not be there. But I just was surprised by that, because this is a team, especially on defense, that was really looking to turn the corner from a leadership perspective. And I think that's one way that, other guys aren't going to look at it sideways, but I just think that's one way to just really further solidify your position as a leader on the team.
TD, last thing for you here. Obviously, this is a really important year for Christian Fulton. I mean, the responsibility that he's going to have certainly elevated from what we saw this time a year ago. And obviously, in year one, dealt with a lot of injuries. What are your expectations for Christian Fulton as he heads now into year two with the Titans?
Yeah, I think the young fellow is going to take a big step. And I think really it starts with him being healthy. I thought it was really funny. He said yesterday, I had an injury that I never even heard of. I thought that was pretty funny, but that just goes to show you, how much experience that young man has with injuries. So I think that's the first thing. And I asked him about taking that next step, and he said another thing with him is just learning the whole defense. And that's something that, especially a guy who's going to be asked to play some nickel, asked to play outside, I think you have to know what everybody else is doing when you're in the nickel, especially because you got to know where your help inside is. You got to, know where you have to carry a certain receiver to before you can pass him off. All those things. There's a lot. And you can't play fast, if you don't know all that. And that's what he said. Knowing the whole scheme is going to allow him to be quick on his feet and make plays. And let me tell you, that dude is a solid man coverage corner. And he can play some zone, but he's good in match and man type coverage. So I think he's going to have a big year, and he's already having a big year off the field, right? He has his store, the trenches, open up there in North Nashville.
Yeah.
So that's something. They got the gear there, so I'm going to keep shopping there. But yeah, man, I think it's going to be a big season for him.
Absolutely. Turron Davenport joins us every week here on Robbie and Rex Road, Fridays at 8 o'clock. Always great stuff. TD, appreciate you taking time to join us this morning. Hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And hey, Rex Road, the secret to my energy this morning, man, I put Bismarck. I put that tape in.
Oh, yeah.
It got me going, man. The Bismarck is going off.
Nice. The Biz. Wait, did you say the tape? Did you actually put in the tape?
No, I didn't. It was the tape. Like you play it on your phone and it looks like the tape.
There you go.
Give you those old school vibes. Man. You know how we do.
Oh, Rex Rowe's got this big grin on his face now.
I had him stumped for a second when I said the tape. That's why we had that silence.
Oh, yeah. He was thrown off. TD, appreciate you, brother. Have a great weekend.
I love it.
All right, much love, folks. Be safe this weekend.
Absolutely. You as well. Turron Davenport, the great reporter for ESPN NFL Nation, also hosts Talking with TD as well. Joins us every week, presented by Freedom Tire Guys, Nashville's premier mobile tire company, online at freedomtireguys.com. We'll react a little bit to what TD had to say, get back into your thoughts on the Predators as well on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. All that coming up next. This is Robbie and Rex Road here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. That was Turron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter and host of Talking with TD, on with us here in the last segment, making a bold prediction here on this Call Your Shot Friday that Deshaun Kaiser will end up being the backup quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, not Logan Woodside, as they head into this 2021 season. Welcome back in, Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Joe, what do you think of those comments there made by our man Turron Davenport that Deshaun Kaiser going to be the one that ends up being the backup quarterback for the Titans, not Logan Woodside?
Well, first of all, I just hope TD was listening there as Elijah came in with some Tribe Called Quest.
Yes.
That would be some awesome tapes that I used to have, some actual cassette tapes. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked by that. I mean, Kaiser's an interesting case. Obviously, all kinds of expectations and opportunity for the worst team in football and sort of cast aside and forgotten about. But I don't think anybody's ever questioned his talent. He's hanging in there. I'm sure he's matured and gotten better. And, he's in this situation of just trying to stay in this league, carve out a role. And I don't think there's any doubt that he is a more talented player than Woodside. The Titans like Woodside. They have liked him, clearly. Woodside's gotten a lot better, but I mean, I would right now say that's going to be a definite battle to watch. I think it's going to be a battle in camp. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if TD ends up being right on that.
Well, I think the point he brings up about, stretching the field vertically and the big arm that Kaiser brings to the table, that's one worth considering. Now, look, I don't know what Logan Woodside's limitations are in terms of his arm strength down the field. And hopefully if you're the Titans, you don't really ever have to find out, because that means that Tannehill stays healthy like he's been able to the last couple of years. But we did have some people heading into this offseason talk about the backup quarterback position. Is that something that you're comfortable with if you're the Titans? Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, I'm absolutely comfortable with Deshaun Kaiser being able to come in and win a game if Tannehill goes down and the Titans need it. But I do think, when that move was made last year and he was brought into the organization, that got lost in the shuffle a little bit, kind of thrown by the wayside. And I'm interested to see how much of a competition he can make it this year with Logan Woodside at training camp, because as we know in this league, you're one hit away from your backup quarterback having to go in there and play significant snaps for you. Again, hopefully that's not the case for the Titans, but I do wonder, of those two, which one the Titans feel like gives them the best chance to win if they need to come in and play.
Yeah, the Titans are like most of the rest of the league. If they lose their starting quarterback, they're in big trouble.
Yes.
It's a situation of kind of like, like Blaine Gabbert, can you get one win here or there? If your starter's missing 2-3 weeks and maybe you got a weaker opponent, can you get enough to try to get it, to get a win there in a tough spot? I agree that Kaiser just sort of went under the radar. There was so much made of Trevor Siemian, but that's because that was in camp. And we all assumed when they said Trevor Siemian, well, sorry, Logan Woodside, carry on. And I mean, I remember on the show last, in August, like the first day, being like, Woodside was a lot better than Siemian. Well, we'll see. Maybe it'll change. It never did. That's not what it looks like now. So, and also, look, this is always a good thing if you're a club, if you can have genuine competition. Not that Logan Woodside wasn't going to work and put in extra time and film and all that stuff, but if you got anybody in a battle at a position in this league, it usually elevates the performance. And so I think that's, something to watch. It's neither option, as you said, is going to be this great solution, but it's what the league is for the most part. And this team is not in any position to go pay someone. They don't have a kicker yet.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
something. For example, they don't have a starting tight end yet, for example.
Exactly. I mean, those are just positions that are obviously way more important than the backup quarterback. So the money, very short to throw around this year for John Robinson and the Titans. We're going to be joined here in just a few minutes by Terry Chris, Predators TV analyst, to break down the loss last night for the Predators in Game 6. Joe, we'll get to Crispy's thoughts coming up here in just a few minutes, but just quickly, I thought it was a case where the Predators in the first 30 minutes of that game played just about as well as you could have hoped for. I thought they had the Canes exactly where they wanted them. And to me, I mean, we're going to talk a lot today and have talked a lot today about the third period and how dominant that was for Carolina. But that goal in the second on the power play by Carolina to make it 3-2 and to be within one heading into the third after I thought the Predators played extremely well to open up that second period, to me, that's the goal I look back on and say, oh, if you could have just gotten out of that second period up 3-1, who knows what could have happened as you go down the stretch there. A tough way to lose last night for the Predators in overtime, and a tough way for the season to come to an end, even though I think they showed better in this series than most people expected that they would.
Yeah, absolutely they did. You know, the big mistakes last night were made by two guys who I'm very confident are going to be part of things moving forward. You know, obviously Ekholm, and it just, he was, you know, so close to getting that thing cleared. That would have done it for that power play. You know, the penalty kill unit really was terrific in that sequence, and under, you know, the execution the Canes can put on you with that power play is special at times. So that mistake, and then obviously Trennan, who, the almost hero of Game 5 with his 2 goals. You know, he ices the puck, is so close to being over the red line, and then obviously he misses his assignment right off that next faceoff with that exhausted group having to go back to a defensive zone faceoff, and you know, that's one of those things for him. It's one of those, I mean, John Hines talked about. That's why that focus and all that stuff in those key moments. That's why it's so important, and for a young guy like that, that's invaluable experience.
Listen to the game every weekday for your chance to win $1,000. It's the game's 1K payday presented by Kentucky Kingdom and Hurricane Bay. Listen for keywords at 9, at noon, and at 3 o'clock. And when you hear it, go to thegamenashville.com and enter the keyword for a shot at $1,000. When we come back, we'll be joined by the legendary Terry Chris, Predators TV analyst, getting his thoughts on the series for the Predators and what to do as they move forward ahead here in the offseason as well. All that coming up next. This is Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robbie and Rex Road here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rex Road, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. And you hear that music, you know what it means. It's that time of the week. We go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our good friend, Predators TV analyst, Terry Crisp. Crispy, what's going on, brother? How we doing?
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. We're fine. We're up. It's a little dull day out there, just sort of a aftertaste of last night's ending of the game. But again, we're up on the right side of the green. So, hey, turn it up and keep going.
That's right. That's always a great place to be, Crispy. So we'll start there. Just your thoughts on Game 6 last night for the Predators. You get out to a 3-1 lead, got a lot of chances to score in the second period, and then Carolina fights and claws their way back into it and wins it in overtime. What were your takeaways from the game last night for the Preds?
You know what? They did the same thing. The fifth and sixth game were ours. We worked hard. I have to give the guys full marks for that. I mean, we come out flying, but we knew, and you know all along that Carolina is one of the top teams, one of the best, and they don't quit. They keep coming at you and at you. And I was listening to you guys a little earlier, and you're right. Just a few little things that turned the tide on them, like the one power play goal at the end of the second there, I believe it was. If we get through that one, I think it's a different story. Probably it should be. The guy's working, but and then once Carolina got that one, and then when they tied it up, then you knew that it was going to be, the pushback was hard, and we didn't. In the third period, they didn't let us. I mean, we didn't have the pushback. It looked like we were running out of gas. They got stronger in the third period. We were on fumes, and no excuses, no nothing. We played our hearts out as far as we could, except that we just didn't have it in that last period, and the guys were trying, and Carolina just slammed the door on us. I mean, I've coached and played before where teams they just steamroll you, and once they got us steamrolling in the third and wouldn't let out, I mean, when the one stat that stood out to me in the third period was that we only had, I think somebody put out 41 seconds of offensive zone puck possession in the third period, and if that stat is anywhere near right, that tells you the whole story of the third period and the Carolina Hurricanes, how they just swamped us in the third period and didn't let us in.
Yeah, Crispy, I actually wanted to ask you about the third period. You know, Ryan Johansson last night, said, credit to Carolina, but also maybe too much sitting back, for the Preds. I know that's tough. You're trying to protect the lead. You've got such a dangerous opponent, and you don't want to give up anything easy. But what is the balance there of sort of, being mindful, but also still trying to be aggressive and get that tack on goal that puts you over the top?
No, you know what? I don't buy that theory. As a coach, I look at my team and how they played and what they did and how we got the lead. And how do we get the lead in the fifth and sixth game? We are aggressive. We are in attack mode. We went after them. We didn't respect them. We went right down their throats and kept doing it and kept going after them. And at the end, they could outlast us and did it. But you don't play not to lose. And then and once you get on your heels and start playing, well, we got to protect this. We can't get a guy caught deep. Then you're playing against yourself, and you're playing right into their hands. And I thought in the third period last night, once they got going, we just tried to put up a blockade. You can't blockade their power play. You can't blockade the attack unless you're attacking, unless you've got the puck, unless you're in their zone. And in the third period last night, that's exactly what happened. Once they got it rolling and we got back on our heels, the phrase that Coach Hines uses all the time is the pushback. We had no pushback against them. And to me, in a thumbnail, that was the game right there in the third period.
Predators TV analyst Terry Crisp on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. So, Crispy, with all that in mind, it's over with in 6 games against Carolina. We know how good Carolina is. I'm really interested to see how this series shakes out between Carolina and Tampa Bay. But as you look back at this season for the Predators and factor in the entire picture, how much of a struggle it was for the first half of the season, the run to get into the playoffs, and now this series against Carolina, what stands out to you about this season for the Predators? What are kind of your thoughts as you put the season in the rearview mirror now, if you're David Poile?
You know what? I look at this season as a roller coaster ride that started out saying, what is going on? Took off, up and down. But I look at it with, if I'm coaching or playing, I look at it with pride. Because when we started after a bad, dismal ending last year and the COVID and the whole, everybody went through this, but we had 8 new guys coming into our lineup. We had all the kids coming up from the minors. And I think that it took a while. I know it did. It took a while for the coaching staff to get together, maybe to know each other, because they didn't have a time to work together. So I look at all of the little pieces that were out there sort of floating around in space, and how the Coach Hines and the staff finally brought the pieces bit by bit like a puzzle together. And then on March the 15th, when that puzzle hit and they took off, I'm proud of them. I mean, I'm as proud as I can be, because these kids played their heart out. I mean, the veterans we had injuries. Veterans went down, and I can't say enough about the kids that came up from the minors and stepped into the gap and just kept this team going. And when you look back on it, it was each lines took turns of stepping up per game and making it happen. One line would lead it, then another line, then another bunch, then the defense corps would take over. And I'm no excuses, none whatsoever this year. I'm proud of the guys, the way they played, how they got to where people said we're not supposed to be there. I don't know why they said that. I mean, if you have enough pride in yourself and work hard enough, you should be there. And I used that phrase before. We earned the right to be in the fight. When playoffs started, everybody said, well, we should be there. Yeah, we earned the right to be there, and we did. So looking back on the whole season, I like the job the coaches did tremendously, what they did for it. I love the additions that we did. And I got to tell you one thing. The story to me is Saros. That young man, our goaltender, played unfriggin' believable this year down the stretch in the playoffs.
Crispy, understanding that obviously we don't know exactly what things are going to look like next year, who's coming back, who's going, there's trades, there's the crack and all this stuff. But just looking at this group of players, if you could pick one player right now to say, have the best possible and come back with that player's best possible game, and that would lift the team, who would that player be?
I thought about that in the last few games as to who was the one guy that continued through all of this besides Saros. Saros is the man. I don't care. And Pekka has got to be there with him for another little while, because he's his mentor and he is the guy that does it. I'd love to see that for another year or so also. But after Saros, the names that should jump up to you are like the ones that've been here so long, the veteran. But that, you have to throw Captain Yossi into the mix in that one there. But I tell you, I like Granlund's game. I mean, I got to be honest. When we let Granlund become a free agent and went back, and when David Poyle signed him, I thought, that's an interesting sign. And then as the year went on, I thought, wow, what a great move that was because I mean, he showed us what type of player he was, and Granlund, and then then guys started to catch up like Cunnin and Cousin and Sissons and these guys. But if you said if I could take one, it might be consistently for what he did and how he did it was Granlund.
Predators TV analyst Terry Crisp has been our guest here on Robbie and Rexroad. Joins us every Friday here on Robbie and Rexroad at 8:30. Crispy, great stuff. We appreciate you taking time to join us and appreciate your time and your perspective all season long, my friend.
Hey, guys, thank
you. Hold on.
We had fun.
Wait. Hold on. Don't go, Crispy. I've been told this is a special day for Terry Crisp.
Uh-oh.
How about a big happy birthday to Terry Crisp?
Happy birthday, Crispy.
Hey, thanks, fellas. Like I said to my wife now this morning, I said, it's just great to be here with you, hon, to celebrate another one. And everyone is a blessing. So thank you very much for that. And while I'm on the vein, thank you guys. It's always been fun. You guys, right, wrong, and different. You love the game. You guys have passion for the game, and you brought it every time out for our sport. So I want to thank you too, fellas. And just this, you and all your families, please stay safe and stay healthy.
Absolutely. You as well, Crispy. We'll talk to you coming up down the road as well.
Thanks, fellas.
Absolutely. Terry Crisp, the legendary voice of the Nashville Predators television analyst, Terry Crisp, joins us every Friday at 8:30. Crispy, one of the best in the business. When we come back, we'll continue to react to the Predators. Their loss last night in Game 6, eliminated from the playoffs. What did we take away from the Predators in this series against Carolina. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. That was Predators forward Ryan Johansson after the game last night. The Predators eliminated with a 4-3 overtime loss against Carolina. Joe, what did you think of those comments there to lead off that answer there from Johansson, saying the Predators are close, they're really close, and what did you think of his line's play last night in Game 6? We talked about it, the importance of Johansson, Duchesne, and Forsberg as a trio heading into Game 6. What did you think of the performance of that line last night in an elimination game for the Predators?
Yeah, I just didn't think it was good enough. They had some moments. They were a threat at times. They made some pushes at times, but I think you wanted a little bit more from them. And some of the evaluation of these things, it gets changed by the third period, right? Because I would say through two periods, those guys, like, you could look at every line and find really good moments, and just a collective, really overwhelming. Maybe overwhelming is a little bit much, but a very strong and clearly superior 5-on-5 play from the Preds in two periods. Just like, I guess the whole crew, in the third period, it went away. And there was, to me, like what Chris was just saying last segment, I think that's what we saw. Now, I don't know if that's, Hines dictating that, or that's just mindset on the ice from these guys. You got to lead. You want to careful. It did look too much like they were on their heels. And Carolina is going to get you if you play like that. And they did. But overall, that line, I just didn't think was good enough. I didn't think it was good enough in the series. I thought there were certainly some big moments. Johansson still had Preds forwards and goals in this series.
Yeah.
He tapped home a 5-on-3 great pass from Roman Josi. Good for him. Still left wanting more.
Still left wanting more. And look, it's interesting to kind of get the perspective of Predators fans today on this series and just how close you think the Predators are. Look, we know this. We knew this heading in. I had Carolina in 6 before the series began, and we knew that they're a really good team. They are among the handful of teams in the NHL that I would consider legitimate Stanley Cup contenders. And Carolina did nothing in this series that convinces me that they're not going to be right there. This is going to be a heck of a series that they have coming up against Tampa Bay. The question is, if you're the Predators, what do you take away from a series like this where you've got 4 consecutive games that go into overtime? It's the third time in the history of the Stanley Cup playoffs that 4 games in a row have gone at least into overtime here. So, that tells you right there, you're right there in this series. You're competitive. We've talked about it in Game 5. The game's right there for the taking if you're the Predators. You had your opportunities to win that game, and Marty Nage just makes a huge play. Carolina wins in overtime. Yesterday, you're up 3-1. It's the first time all series long that you had a multi-goal lead in this series. You're right there, and then all of a sudden the power play goal, it's 3-2 heading into the third, and you just to me it boils down to this. I felt like there were certain times in this series that Carolina could just elevate their game to a level that the Predators just couldn't get to. I think Carolina at their peak, and I think we saw Carolina pretty close to their peak in that third period last night against the Predators. I think right now that's a level that the Predators just can't get to. And the question is, how close are they to being able to get to that level? I think you could ask, 10 different Predators fans that question, and 5 may be on one side, 5 may be on the other side as well. And that's the challenge now for David Poile as they move into this offseason. How close are you really to being a Stanley Cup contender? And I think that's going to require just say, all right, well, we won 20 out of 28 games to close out the regular season. We found our franchise goaltender. We feel great about him heading into next year, and there are some very good young pieces that you feel good about. There's not much that needs to happen to this roster. Let's just throw this thing back out there again and see what happens. I'm not saying that absolutely wouldn't work, but I think that's a dangerous game to play when you win 20 of 28 coming down the stretch and your goaltender's operating at like a .940 save percentage. I think there's got to be some realism as well as you look at this offseason, and I do think there are some changes that need to be made to this core group as they head into this offseason.
I do too. But what may happen is things are explored to seriously change the core group. They don't happen, and so that's what you're left with. And you say, well, hopefully, 27-1 and taking the Canes forward. But I would tend to agree that, it's the puzzle is not complete. And again, it's at the top. It's, what do your top six look like? How do they match up with other top teams around the league? The Canes are an example of a team, they don't have that one superstar. They've got a lot of really good players, and really a lot more guys who I think stepped up to what they are supposed to be in this series. Aho stepped up. Stahl was magnificent in this series. Obviously, when he was on the ice, but it is like, you can take the approach that, okay, well, this team from mid-March on was not a 4-seed team. This is one of the best teams in the league. But I think the best counter argument is what you just said. Saros, yes, they found Saros. I feel confident Saros is going to be the starter, and he's going to be a very good starter in this league. But can he play like this all the time? I think you're asking for too much there. You have to have more at the very top of your forward roster to be a contender in this league.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Shane from Ashland City texting in saying, I don't understand your concept. We all have no reason to think I want to see more where we were expecting to lose in 5. And quite frankly, that series should have gone to 7. We are just as old as the Canes. When we were all expecting to be huge underdogs, the odds were plus 120 last night. Come on. I hear you, but it's not just this series that we're talking about. This is the overall picture of this franchise. How close are you to being a Stanley Cup contender? And, Joe, you bring up a good point there. Part of the answer to that is, what is the top of your lineup going to look like? What is your forward group going to bring to the table? And right now, there's just no way you can convince me this team is close to being a Stanley Cup contender if you're not going to get more out of your top 2 centermen. I mean, you just can't win that way. You cannot win without getting more out of your top 2 centermen. Ryan Johansson's got to be better. Matt Duchene has got to be better. If they're not, number one, you need to move on from one of them if you can. If not, it's just hard to win that way. So I hear what Shane's saying there. It was a heck of a series from the Predators. But when you're evaluating the overall picture here, if they're not going to be any better than they've been the last couple of years, it's very difficult to compete that way. That's just the bottom line when it comes to this discussion.
I'll go to Adam in Portland on the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. You guys are too critical of them. You get paid to be critical, so I get it. But I thought the top line played really well. Didn't score much, but the team altogether played their butts off. I couldn't be more proud of them. And more along those lines. I mean, these two comments, and then let's go back to Ben. Yeah, it's just, look, I mean, both sides of that argument, I mean, you're not going to convince each other, right? I mean, there's people who are like, this is why they should have sold everything, move it all, fire people, trade people. This is not it. And then some people are like, hey, I'm proud of this team, and I don't think they're that far away. I think for me, it's hard to tell me, even though they improved so much. I mean, John Hines said it himself, like, they got to reach a higher level. To him, he's taking his players, and they're going to try to keep trying to find those little things in games that obviously meant a lot to them. But I don't think they reach the higher level with the roster as constructed unless the guys we constantly talk about flip the switch next year.
Well, yeah. But
if they're here.
Yeah, if they're here. And at this point, I mean, look, let's be honest here. We're 2 years into this discussion. I mean, Ryan Johansson has not been the same player for the last 2 years. I thought he was fine in this playoff series, but there's got to be more there. Matt Duchene has not lived up to expectations here for 2 years. This is a pretty large sample size at this point. So, look, I have a hard time believing they're just all of a sudden going to turn it around. I think there's talent there. I like a lot of the buttons that John Hines has pushed with this group, but one of the buttons that he's not really been able to figure out is Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene. And that's a big problem as you move forward here. We'll continue to take your thoughts on the Predators on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. 1025 The Game and T-Mobile have partnered up to give you a chance to experience a Nashville SC game this season. Tune in every Monday to Darren, Donick, and Chase for the keyword to text in to win. Good luck from 1025 The Game, T-Mobile, and Nashville SC. And speaking of Nashville SC, later this morning, it's your chance to participate in the Nashville SC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. If you guess correctly which player scores a goal in the game this Sunday night, you win a prize pack and a pair of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC home game. We'll have that opportunity coming up for you later this morning at 9:45. This is Robbie and Rexroad, live from the wholesaling studios, powered by RumbleOn.com, here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Welcome back in. Final hour of Robbie and Rex Road here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rex Road, Elijah Campbell here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. The Predators falling last night in overtime against Carolina, eliminated from the playoffs by the Hurricanes. Got a whole lot of thoughts to get to on the text line. We'll start now. Got a texter, Joe, that says, I place full blame for the collapse last night on Scott Stapp. A lot of Scott Stapp hatred taking place today on social media. I thought it was awesome to see him in the building last night. Joe, I know you enjoyed it as well, to have Scott Stapp and basically a full Creed concert taking place as well.
I was sitting there watching that. We're down wide open. I'm hoping that my Wi-Fi is jacked up, so that didn't come through well.
It came through very well, so your Wi-Fi seems to be a little bit better than it was the last segment.
News today.
Look, I agree.
Lions.
I agree with the texter from this standpoint. I blame Scott Stapp for the collapse as well, but not from the same mindset that he does. He should have come back out there and played the second intermission as well, because after Scott Stapp was on the band stage, Predators played pretty well in that second period. If he comes out there for the second intermission, maybe that breathes some new life into the Predators for the third.
Took him higher in the second period.
That's right. Sure did.
I mean, they could have come out and played some cover songs of a good band like Pearl Jam.
I mean, I guess they could have. Apparently, Scott Stapp, one intermission was the limit for him last night at Bridgestone Arena. Let's go back to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. JD texting in, the future of the Preds is kind of easy for me. How do our top guys compare to Stahl and Aho? My opinion, we're a pretty good distance away. This comes from JD on the text line. It's hard to argue after that series.
Yeah, Carolina's a really well-built team. And again, I just feel like all their guys did – I don't have their numbers for the series in front of me, but Svechnikov. Aho looked like Aho. Stahl was a beast. You get McGinn coming in there. Nate's just coming in there. I mean, they did what you hope, I think, in a series. Now, they made some mistakes too, and I think the Preds forced them to mistakes. This was an even series in terms of play. Again, 18 minutes of the whole series. They were separated by more than a goal, and the Preds had 6 of those minutes last night when they're up 3-1 in the second. But it was a close series, and the Preds hung in there again better than I think most people thought, and it wasn't just fluky. I mean, there's a lot to take out of it that's positive, but I agree. I mean, when it comes down to it, and it would be different too against a Tampa. When you play a Tampa Bay as Carolina, you get the real star power that you don't have. But Carolina's an example of a team that, to me, is just really well up and down the lineup, has depth, plays well. I love their style of play. I think they take on their coach. Some things, are under development for the Preds. There are things to take forward that you have to like. And I don't think it's a small thing or a significant thing that you love or line you have coming back next year. I think a lot of those secondary players were outstanding in this series, but you also, like Eric Hall, is a guy who was fundamentally important in this series, and he's probably not going to be on your team next year. For example, Rocco Grimaldi is a non-factor. He's going to be on your team next year. What's his future? A lot of things to figure out, but you're not going to have the exact same structure even in the bottom 6 that you had this year. So the answer keeps coming back around to you better have top players who play like top players if you want to be really good in this league.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Renee in Clarksville texting in. Overall picture as a whole, I completely agree. We have to expect more out of Johansson and Matt Duchene. On the other side, we also have to find more speed. Carolina outskated us every single game that we played against them this season, and I agree with that for the most part. Now, I also will say this. Carolina's at a little bit of a different level when it comes to speed. There are a handful of teams in the league that I would put right there in the same ballpark with Carolina in terms of not only their foot speed and the way that they play the game, that's impressive, but also just the way they move the puck. I mean, they're so good at moving the puck. They're so tenacious on the forecheck. So, yes, I agree with what Renee said there. I also think that's a pretty high bar to have in terms of the speed that Carolina brings to the table, because they are awfully good in that area as well. Let's go back to the text line. Paul texting in, Tanner Jeannot had more 5-on-5 ice time last night than Forsberg. That's certainly part of the problem. I agree big guys need to step up, but they also need to be on the ice to do so. It's hard to watch an overtime end without your best weapons having an opportunity because of this weird obsession with starting the fourth-line grinders. And I agree with that. Like, look, you can be as critical of Johansson and Duchesne as you want, and we've certainly done that today here on the show. I get why John Hines keeps rolling out that fourth line to start series and to start games. But like in overtime, you need your best players out there as much as possible. I'm sorry. Like, you just do. And I agree with Paul from this standpoint. It's tough to watch an overtime go by and to never really see Philip Forsberg step foot on the ice. Like, that to me, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that is fair. You talked yesterday about Forsberg, right, needing to step up big time. I don't think he had the game that you want from him. I think that stat is peculiar. I mean, Hines in game reacts to like that, right? I mean, maybe more than a lot of coaches do in terms of ice time. But I would tend to agree. I mean, and look, I knew if they lost, it's funny because it hasn't come up today, but there's a lot of reaction before the game to no Tolvanen in the lineup, Richardson's in the lineup instead. Now, look, personally, I think that line was excellent. Richardson in there. So I think like it worked. However, when you talk about a team that needs scoring and you don't have Tolvanen out there, you don't have him on the power play, you can still make the case like you need to have your threats involved as much as possible, whatever threats you have.
Let's go back to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. John texting in, I'm proud of the team for most of all going from a team that was excruciating to watch to one that was very fun and entertaining. They turned the season around and made the Hurricanes work hard for that series win, so I'm happy with that. That said, I don't think anyone can say this justifies only minor tweaks to the team this offseason. I think we can avoid the full rebuild, but there needs to be some changes, including some in the core of this team as well. That coming from John in Nashville. And, Joe, a couple of the names that I threw out there a little bit earlier in the show, I'm interested to see what the future looks like for Victor Arvidsson, Ryan Ellis. I mean, Arvidsson to me is a guy where I think it's legitimately concerning at this point that maybe he's just not the same player. I mean, he does not appear to have the speed burst. I know he wasn't in there the last few games of this series as well with an upper body injury. But even if he was healthy, like I don't know if Arvidsson's in the lineup the last couple of games based on the way other guys were playing. Look, we saw it in the bubble last year. He looked like Victor Arvidsson once again. But, Victor Arvidsson and the speed burst that we've grown accustomed to seeing, that has been way more of the rarity than it has been the norm in the past couple of years. And to me, that is very concerning as the Predators move forward here.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, we've both called the shot that Arvidsson is going to be somewhere else next year. So he's one of those, and that's one of those. I agree with basically that entire text, by the way. I think that's the right way to look at it. Like it's taking both things. It's really liking a lot of what you see. It's having optimism about some of these young guys who have come on, and then it's also believing like something more than just nibbling around the edges needs to happen for this team to take the next step.
Go to theGameNashville.com to check out Nashville's best deals. This week, purchase a $100 gift card for $50 of downtown dollars. Hundreds of downtown businesses are ready to welcome you back. And with this downtown dollars special promotion, it's never been easier to shop, sip, and snack local while supporting your favorite businesses. Get yours now at theGameNashville.com. We'll continue to take your thoughts on the Predators when we come back. Rob, hang with us on our phone line. We'll get to you coming up next. This is Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. ESPN 94.9 is the official English radio home of the Nashville Soccer Club. Listen in Saturday as Nashville SC takes on Atlanta United FC. Pregame begins at 2:15 and the match starts at 2:30. Welcome back in, Robbie and Rex Road here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well. Talking all things Nashville Predators, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Got a texter on the text line that says, how about seeing if the Kraken would take Arvidsson Duchesne in the expansion draft? It seems like the Kraken are the best opportunity for the Preds to lose some salary. I don't know if I can envision the Kraken taking on both of those contracts. I don't know if I can envision them taking on Duchesne's contract by itself.
Yeah, I mean, how many people you think the Kraken are taking from you here?
It's an interesting thought. Hey, I am very fascinated to see how the Predators handle the expansion draft, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about that coming up later this summer. Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Rob from Franklin, who wants to weigh in. Rob, thanks for calling into Robbie and Rex Road.
Good morning, guys. Yeah, kind of a sad morning, and nothing to be ashamed of with the Preds going, taking the Hurricanes to 4 different overtimes, 2 of which we won, 2 of which we lost. But there was an interesting side note that nobody has mentioned, and with 13 minutes and 59 seconds gone in the third period, unexplainably, Ryan Ellis goes chasing to the blue line in a game that you're leading 3-2, to chase a forward that was sent there as a decoy. Your number one job, Ryan Ellis, is to stand in front of the net and protect against that Hamilton pass. You failed it. You didn't do it, and for whatever, and he looked at himself like, oh, yeah, I missed that one. Well, you knew that when that goal was scored that we were doomed. And as far as I'm concerned, leave him unprotected and let the Kraken get him. He got outmanned, outmuscled. He was, in my opinion, one of the main reasons why we did not win the series. But I don't think that Johansson and Duchesne were the reason, because when they finally found their stride in the line playing with better first-line talent, they actually did well. And you can't play at that pace for an 82-game season, but I think we can see better. And the last thing is, as far as, Arvidsson, he's been a great Predator. Grimaldi has been a good Predator. But you take those guys in a playoff atmosphere like this, and they would disappear because they're small and they're easily intimidated. And I would not be sorry to see either Rocco Grimaldi or Arvidsson out of the lineup. And I'm praying that somebody else picks up Ellis, because it was just obvious, outmanned, outgunned, and he's supposed to be a veteran. He's supposed to not get beaten by that play. What are your thoughts?
Hey, thanks for the call, Rob. We appreciate it. We'll get to all that. It's interesting. Look, regardless of what your thoughts are on Ryan Ellis, I can tell you this: losing Ryan Ellis in the expansion draft is horrible asset management if you're the Predators. So if you think that the best idea for Ryan Ellis is to just let him go and to not get anything for him and lose him in the expansion draft, that would be a horrendous case of asset management from David Poile and the Predators. Ryan Ellis has got some trade value. If you feel like Ryan Ellis, it's time to move on from him, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but you better get something for him, because Ryan Ellis, I still think, is very valuable around the league. So I don't buy into this idea of just letting him go to the Kraken. I think that would be a mistake. I think that would be, basically general manager malpractice if that ends up happening with David Poile. As far as the play last night, it's interesting to get Rob's thoughts there. He puts the blame, and Rob calls in a lot here with some great insight, puts the blame on Ellis on that play. And then last night you hear John Hines in the postgame, Joe. He's putting most of the blame on Yakov Trenin, saying Ellis did the right thing, kind of creeping up to the point there, going after the forward, and it was Trenin's responsibility to cover the middle of the ice on the backside where Hamilton scored the goal. It's kind of interesting to look at that play, but John Hines seems to think that one was on Yakov Trenin last night.
Right. Man on, man off face-offs, and I don't think he could be more clear about it. that that was Trennan's responsibility. I think Rob makes some good points. I think Rob may be a little down on the small guys, but but in all seriousness,
understandably,
I mean yeah, I mean in the playoffs that plays out sometimes. You're absolutely right on Ellis. I mean, he's a guy that you can get something for. Duchesne in particular to me, but also I think Johansson to a certain extent, like with the numbers they carry and the numbers they're not producing. I mean, I think you have to do some convincing to even get someone to take one of them off your hands. So, Elizabeth Knoll on Twitter, good point here. When we need to see more from Duchesne and Johansson all year, perhaps they're not our best players, just our most expensive ones. Well, sure. I mean, but that's the issue, is that your most expensive ones should be your best. And that's really, to me, the bottom line of this dilemma right now.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Jacob from Murfreesboro texting in. Is there a bit of a Trotz type mindset with Hines and his approach to young players? We were sold on this youth movement all last offseason, but it never materialized until injuries forced his hand. Then you have guys like Tolvanen and Fabro in and out of the lineup. Just makes me wary of him being the guy to lead the next wave of players we have coming up. Look, I think we've made way too much of this youth movement stuff. I mean, David Poyle said that at the beginning of last offseason, and then Granlund was in there, and then Halla was in there. You made 2 more signings, and there just wasn't a whole lot of room for the youth movement to begin the season. I like Eeli Tolvanen. I think he played really well this year for the most part. I don't think Eeli Tolvanen's been very good since he came back from injury. Like, I saw a lot of people yesterday just outraged that Eeli Tolvanen was a healthy scratch in Game 6. I'm sorry, but, what did Eeli Tolvanen do in this series to convince you that he absolutely needed to be in the lineup yesterday? I didn't see it from Eeli Tolvanen in this series.
No.
Now, I still think his future's bright. I think he's going to be a good player for the Predators. But this idea that it was just a crime to sit Eeli Tolvanen down yesterday, I just don't buy into that.
No, I mean, the reason to keep him in is just because of what he possesses, not what he's done, right? But I will push back on this idea of Poyle being hesitant or too quick to pull young players. Let's also remember Game 1, he had Jeannot and Olivier on different lines. Obviously, Trennan, Carrier being a top 4 guy. I mean, I think the thing that Hines has done, and it may not be the right decision every time, but he is going on performance. So young, high priced, off the power play, whatever it is. I mean, I think he's made moves to try to win and just try to maximize performance, which is, I think, what you have to do. And you have to put all that other stuff aside. But it's not like it's all one thing with him and young players. Some of them have gotten tons of trust from him.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I think this is going to continue to be a theme as they move forward here. I talked about it earlier. Tolvanen's going to be a full-time player next year. I think Philip Tomasino is going to make this team next year. I think he's going to be on the team. And then, to the last texter's point, what's going to happen with Dante Fabro? I mean, if you would have told me heading into this series that he would not play at all through 6 games, I would have probably said you were crazy. And you still – I get it. It's Ben Harper, and he can play the left out there. I thought at times in this series, Ben Harper got exposed for his lack of foot speed, his lack of ability to move the puck. He made some good plays. It's not like he was just completely awful out there at all times. But I do think Fabro is a better defenseman than Ben Harper. The problem is, as we've talked about many times, somebody's got to play on the left side. But, Fabro's 22 years old. He's a first-round pick. He came in 2 years ago and looked really good in the playoffs, albeit on the third pairing for the Predators in a sheltered role. He has not taken the step that I thought he would have taken by this point. I think it's also worthy to keep in mind he's a defenseman that's different. I've been told by multiple people much smarter than me that the defensemen is the hardest position to learn, especially at the top 4 level at the NHL level. So people are going to develop at different rates. But I think there are a lot of Predators fans right now who have just given up on Dante Fabro, and I would caution against that at this point. I get it. He's not developed as quickly as you would have hoped. He is 22 years old. That's something to keep in mind as you move forward here.
Yeah, no question. And look, based on the track record, there's a lot to go through on the David Poyle track record. We talk about the forwards all the time. Certainly, recent moves, a lot of them have been bad. The track record of identifying, developing defensemen in this organization, boy, that makes me feel like in a couple of years we might be having a totally different discussion on Fabro. But he does have to respond. And I felt like last night after the game, when Jared asked about him, I think John Hines took the opportunity to sort of put that out there, like, hey, yeah, there's belief. He's got to respond to that. And part of the story is Carrier. It's Carrier, I think, has been one of the most surprising individual stories. And there's a lot of candidates for that. But, I mean, he has changed the way this D-corps looks.
Yeah, I think so. And he deserves a lot of credit for what he's come in there and done. And, look, I think he gives them a lot of options as they move forward here, too, that you probably didn't feel like you had if you're David Poyle and the Predators heading into this season. But I think a big revelation in Alex Carrier in this playoff series. When we come back, it is time for weekend winners, and it was another banner week last night for Joe Rexrode. The standings are getting out of control. We'll try again this week. Coming up next, this is Robbie and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. And it is that time of the week, time for Weekend Winners here on Robbie and Rex Road. We've got a fun edition of Weekend Winners coming up today. Lots of NBA action coming up as well. The Grizzlies taking on the Jazz at home in games 3 and 4. That'll be a part of our picks as well. And Joe, remember, the weekend, a little bit longer this time around. Memorial Day coming up on Monday, so game 4 of that series taking place on Monday as well. Nashville SC, we'll get to that game coming up here in just a few minutes as well. Very quickly, though, Joe Rexrode, let's give a standings update that I know you're just dying to give after our Weekend Winners edition from last week.
Yeah, let's see. Joey the Greek has some information for you that you might want to know.
I'm sure.
I went 5-1 last week with 6 points. My only loss was the Preds losing, or the Preds winning Sunday. I picked the Canes, but the Preds were my lock Friday to win game 3. So 5-1. I'm 50-28, 61 points, 11-2 on my locks. Send me to Vegas right now. It's time.
That's very nicely done.
Ryan Porth and Robbie, you guys both had solid weeks. You both went 3-3. Both got your locks. So you both got 4 points. So Porth, 38-39, 44 points, 6-7 on his locks. Robbie, 34-44, 40 points, 6-7 on locks. So you guys are close still.
Not close to you, though. We'll see if we can make this work as we go down the stretch here. Elijah Campbell picking today for Ryan Porth. Let's begin with the Grizzlies and the Utah Jazz. Game 3 coming up between the Grizzlies and the Jazz. Looking forward to this one tomorrow. We're going to go straight money line with this one because we made some called shots earlier in the program. Let's go money line with the Grizz and the Jazz. Elijah, we begin with you. Who wins between the Grizzlies and the Jazz coming up in Game 3?
In Game 3, give me the Utah Jazz. I love the Memphis Grizzlies with Donovan Mitchell being back. It opens up the floor for the best shooting team in the NBA. So give me the three-point shooters. I'll take the Jazz in Game 3.
Elijah going with the Jazz in Game 3. Joe Rexrode, the Grizzlies and the Jazz in Game 3. The money line, who wins between Memphis and Utah?
I hear what Elijah's saying, but I am going with the Grizz to retake the lead in this series, coming up with a big effort at home. As I said earlier, Dylan Brooks, he will equalize some of that three-point shooting.
So both Joe and I taking the Grizzlies in this matchup in Game 3. Game 4 between the Grizzlies and the Jazz coming up on Monday. Let's stick with money line. Joe Rexrode, we begin with you. Who wins Game 4 between the Grizzlies and the Jazz coming up on Monday?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Jazz this time. I think the Jazz, get the split, get home court back. I think they'll respond and even it up.
I'm going to go with the Jazz as well in Game 4. I think you'll have an even series after 4 games. Probably a much more even series than most people anticipated heading into this matchup. Elijah Campbell, who do you have in Game 4 between the Jazz and the Grizz?
I also think it'll be an even series. I think the Grizzlies win Game 4. I think that's when it gets a little emotional in the grindhouse. They're going to use that little extra oomph from the crowd to steal a game they had no business winning. So I think they're going to end up knotting the series up, going back to Salt Lake City.
So a bit of a different strategy there from Elijah Campbell. Joe Rexrode and Robbie Stanley both taking the Grizzlies in Game 3, both taking the Jazz in Game 4. We'll see how that plays out. I already feel bad about it because Elijah, talking basketball, usually knows exactly what he's talking about. So we'll see what happens down that stretch here for the Grizzlies in Games 3 and 4. Nashville SC taking on Atlanta United this weekend on Saturday. Pre-game on ESPN 94.9 at 2:15. The match beginning at 2:30. Joe, with the money line on this, as we know, you can pick a Nashville SC win, an Atlanta United win, or a draw in this matchup. Joe, we begin with you. Who are you going with between Nashville SC and Atlanta United?
I'm going back to the well. It's been very good to me. Give me the draw.
Joe Rexrode going with a draw between Nashville SC and Atlanta United. Elijah Campbell, Atlanta United and Nashville SC, the money line. Who wins, or is it a draw this weekend in Atlanta?
I got to go with Atlanta. Don't want to do it. Not a fan of the fellas in Atlanta, but I think they get it done this weekend. Kind of a rivalry brewing between the two. I think it's going to take a little bit for Nashville SC to be able to get over that hump, even though I feel like Nashville SC is the better team right now. Still early. Give me Atlanta for the early season upset.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Atlanta as well. Nashville SC currently unbeaten this season. I mean, that's got to come to an end at some point. I think that comes to an end this weekend. Give me Atlanta United in this matchup against Nashville SC. And now we get to the individual portion of the program here on the show. I will lead us off with the first round of individual picks. I hate to do it. It makes me sad to do it, but the Milwaukee Bucks have been dominant against the Miami Heat thus far. Give me the Bucks -5 against the Miami Heat in Game 4. I think they close out my beloved Miami Heat. They do so in impressive fashion and complete the sweep. I'll take Bucks -5 against the Heat in Game 4. Elijah Campbell, the first round of your individual picks.
Smart. I probably would have gone the same there too, but I want to go with a Game 7. I like the Vegas Golden Knights to shut out the Minnesota Wild. Push comes to shove, the better team is going to win. Valiant effort by the Wild to push to 7. I did not think it would go 7. Props to them, Cam Talbot and the young fellas they got over there in Minnesota. But tonight, or not tonight, it's Game 7. I don't know when it is. Is that
it
tonight?
Is tonight.
That's tonight? Okay, well, tonight's the night that Marc-Andre Fleury closes that door on one of the best stories in the playoffs so far.
So Vegas.
Okay, you got to go with the line. What's the line?
The line is 1.5.
Okay.
So Vegas minus the 1.5
I'll
against
take it.
the Minnesota Wild. Joe Rexrode, the first round of your individual picks.
You know, I agree that Elijah knows about hoops, but I mean, Robbie, do I need to go dig up my entire NBA betting record here?
No, you don't.
All right, well, let's just keep adding to it. Knicks Hawks tonight. Oh man, it's already an emotional series, and boy, have these teams gotten after each other, and the fans have gotten after, especially Trae Young. I think Atlanta coming home. It's a tough one. It's Atlanta giving 5. I think they will cover that with a big performance at home tonight. So give me the Hawks -5.
Hawks -5 in Game 3 against the New York Knicks. That's the first round of the individual bets. Elijah, lead us off with the second round of the individual picks here on Weekend Winners.
I will go the other way on Joe there, and I'm going to fade Joe, and I'm going Knicks on the road. I think there's going to be a large Knicks contingency in Atlanta that's going to help boost them over the top. I like the Hawks, but they're incredibly inconsistent. There's a little more veteran leadership on that Knicks team. I think it's a little bold for Joe and I both to be able to dip into the well of what is the most tightly contested series in the NBA playoffs. But I'm going to go Knicks to win outright. I'm not even going to use the spread. I think they're going to win outright. They're underdogs. I think they win this thing outright in Game 3, take a 2-1 lead.
So Elijah going Knicks on the money line. I like it. They're not even going with the spread.
You don't want the 5 points.
I don't need the 5
points.
points.
Is not going to like hearing
that. He said, I don't need the 5 points. I like the confidence there from Elijah Campbell. Joe Rexrode, your second individual pick today in Weekend Winners.
Man, I love that, Elijah. Okay. Nets Celtics. No, you know what? Let me go this one because this is going to be my lock. Clippers at the Mavs. The Clippers have been an absolute mess. The Mavs have looked fantastic. I'm a bit stunned by what I've seen. It's also maybe a bit stunning that the Clippers are 2.5-point favorites. But you know what? I think the Clippers are going to have that response on the road. I will give the 2.5 and make that my lock that the Clippers are going to take Game 3.
So the Clippers, the lock for Joe Rexrode in this competition against the Mavs in Game 3. I'll go the other way, and I'll make it my lock. Give me the Mavs plus the 3 against the Clippers.
Guaranteed.
Luka Doncic looks like the best player in the world right now. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying that's what he looks like right now. He has been awesome. Give me the Mavs plus 3 against the Clippers and make it my lock.
Hey, if they keep throwing Patrick Beverly out there to guard him, he might score 70.
It's true. He very well might do that. The final round of individual
so that line
picks.
Is 3?
Yes, it's 3.
All right.
So Joe Rexrode, the final round of individual picks belongs to you. Lead us off.
All right, now I'll go Nets Celtics, which is so far has looked like a massive mismatch. I think the Celtics are going to come home and make it a game, more of a game than it has even looked possible through 2. They are getting 8 points. That's a big number. Give me the Celtics plus 8 tonight in Game 3 against Brooklyn.
So the Celtics plus 8 against the Nets. We'll see if the Celtics can respond to that. Elijah Campbell, your final individual pick today in the competition.
Oh, I'm so tempted to go the other way with the Nets -8.
Come on, let's go.
That is so tempting because the Celtics are atrocious, and I don't know what the hell has happened to them over the course of the last 2 years. But I'm going to go with one of the other series in the Eastern Conference. The Sixers -5.5, Game 3 against Washington.
Yes.
The Wizards have been lucky to be able to be within any kind of striking distance against the Sixers in those first 2 games. They're an atrocious defensive team. The Sixers are starting to get it clicking offensively. I think the line's -5.5. I would take it if it's 9.5. So
there
Sixers win big.
Lots of confidence for Elijah.
Is that your lock then?
That's my lock.
That's Elijah's lock today here on the program. Sixers -5.5 against Washington. Hopefully everyone keeps the popcorn in the stands in this matchup as well. We'll see what happens on that front. My final individual pick, give me Minnesota +1.5 tonight in Game 7 against Vegas. I think Vegas wins outright, but I think this is going to be close right down to the wire. Give me Minnesota plus the 1.5 tonight against Vegas in Game 7.
Lots of head-to-head. I like it.
Lots of head-to-head. This could be interesting weekend in weekend winners. And remember, Game 4 coming up between the Grizzlies and the Jazz on Monday. So some extended weekend winners this weekend with Memorial Day coming up as well. That does it for today's edition of Weekend Winners. Right now, though, time for you to hit up the phone line, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Be the first caller for Nashville SC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. Nashville SC taking on Atlanta United tomorrow. Guess the goal scorer, and you'll win a prize pack brought to you by Camarena Tequila and some tickets to a Nashville SC game as well. We'll do that next. This is Robbie and Rexroad here on ESPN 1025 The Game.
It's hooked in and headed in. Delirium. Yonder Cadiz.
Who's going to find the back of the net in the upcoming Nashville SC match? Robbie and Rexroad make their picks to click for the match and welcome a listener to do the same. NSC Pick the Click on ESPN 102.5 The Game is brought to you by Camarena Tequila.
And it is that time for NSC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. Nashville SC taking on Atlanta United tomorrow, pregame at 2:15. Match starts at 2:30 on ESPN 94.9. Joe Rexroad off to an early lead in the Nashville SC Pick to Click competition, correctly guessing last week Randall Leal would be the goal scorer for Nashville SC. So Rexroad up by 1 in this competition. Without further ado, let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in today's participant, which is Josh. Josh, thanks for calling into Robbie and Rexroad.
Hey, how y'all fellas doing today?
We are doing great. Hope you are as well. So, Josh, Nashville SC taking on Atlanta United. Who is your pick to click for Nashville SC? Who is your goal scorer against Atlanta United?
I don't want to mess his name up, but I think it's like Hani Mukhtar.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Hani Mukhtar is the pick for Josh. Josh, we appreciate you taking time to call in.
Hey, thank you, fellas. Y'all have a great day.
Absolutely, you
Thanks,
as
Josh.
well. So Josh selecting Hani Mukhtar in the competition against Atlanta United. I like that pick, Joe. Pretty good stuff there by Josh. So Hani Mukhtar is off the board. Joe, you had the first pick last week. I have the first pick this week, and I'm excited about it. And I'm going to steal your thunder. Give me Randall Leal to score a goal against Atlanta United. The guy is just electric. I mean, just watching him play is so much fun. Give me Randall Leal to find the back of the net against Atlanta United. Elijah Campbell, you're up next in this competition for Nashville SC taking on Atlanta United. Hani Mukhtar off the board. Randall Leal off the board as well. Who is your pick to click for Nashville SC?
This is tough, but I gotta go Yonder Cadiz.
Yonder.
He's got 2 goals on the season already. I'm gonna go ahead and play it a little safe here, a little layup.
I like it. Yonder Cadiz selected by Elijah Campbell as well, which leaves Joe Rexroad left in the competition as well. Hani Mukhtar off the board. No Randall Leal or Yonder Cadiz as well. Rexroad, your Nashville SC pick to click against Atlanta United is who?
What the heck do you mean it's tough? Of course you're going to take Yonder Cadiz. Come on.
So that's why I said it was a layup. I've thought about do I want to lay it up or do I want to pull up from 35?
Could have gone off the board.
This competition is going to be very much, we have to make sure the rotation of who gets the last pick is very fair.
It's been fair.
I'm going to, I know. I'm just saying, I count on you to make sure that we rotate it correctly.
All right.
I'm going to go with CJ Sapong.
Okay.
He's got a goal. He's also from Manassas, Virginia, where I used to live. And so
that's why you're going.
I'm going to go with CJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
We like that.
Exactly.
Very well done, Joe Rexroad. So that is today's edition of Nashville SC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. And we'll see whether or not Nashville SC can keep the unbeaten streak going tomorrow against Atlanta United. Joe, just a few minutes left here in the show here. Your final thoughts on the Preds from last night. They lose in Game 6. Your takeaways from this series against Carolina. What's kind of your state of the Predators as they now head into the offseason here with some big decisions to make?
Things look better. They do. They look better. They look way better than they looked in mid-March, except, I guess, for people who are like, it's either blow it completely up or forget about it. But they look better. There are things to build on. You start with the guy in net. You found your goalie. I think that you feel better about your coach, too. I think you should if you're a Preds fan. And it was an impressive performance. It was overachieving. That said, nibbling around the edges is not enough. There has to be an evaluation of everything, including David Poyle's performance, like a real evaluation. And there has to be a significant move to shake things up. The hard part is what, and can you pull it off? But I don't think this team comes back and does what it proposes to do or fans want it to do by being basically the same team.
I would agree, and we're going to have a lot of time to talk about that starting next week as well. Lots of decisions coming up for David Poyle and the Predators. I'm sure here in the next few days we'll have some end-of-season media availabilities as well, where lots of interesting conversations are going to happen with those. Joe, we're not going to have a show on Monday due to Memorial Day. And I do just want to say, I know that we kind of sometimes take things for granted, and you'll be out there at the pool or doing whatever you're doing on Monday, and all that's fine. But just to remember what Memorial Day is, and those who have served in our country and who have provided and given the ultimate sacrifice so that we may live in this great country. I know we're in a climate right now where there's a lot of yelling going back and forth on both sides, and it could become pretty unbearable, to be honest, at times. This is still a pretty great place to live, still a pretty great country in this world, and just cannot describe my thankfulness for those who have given the ultimate sacrifice. So just wanted to take a minute and say that as we head into Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, well said, and it's something that everyone should be able to agree on. There aren't a lot of things, but this is one of them.
Absolutely. So I hope everybody is safe this weekend. I hope you have a great Memorial Day weekend with your friends and with your family. We will not be here on Monday. We'll be back Tuesday morning here on Robbie and Rexrow. With that in mind, Darren Donica Chase is coming up next. Hope everybody has a great weekend. This is ESPN 102.5 The Game.